How'd that sound? Pretty good?
It's like an echo.
All right. Call to order our January 10th workshop. It is 5:30 p.m. We have a quorum up here. Everybody's here. And looks like we're ready to go with the first item, which is our community involvement review. Emmy Shoup, are you around?
There she is.
I see your face. I don't hear you.
Okay, thank you. I've got my mic on. I'm in
Okay.
council chambers in spirit. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you tonight from home, given the blizzard conditions, and look forward to our discussion.
Awesome.
So I'm going to pull up my presentation real quick.
Okay. We can hear you really good, so.
Thank you. Good. Can you see my presentation okay?
Yes.
Yes. What planning processes?
Oh, let me go back.
Community involvement.
Okay, so tonight I'm coming to you to talk about community involvement. My name is Emmy Shoup. I'm the associate planner here with the City of Sisters. And on November 2nd, we had the opportunity to have a discussion with the Planning Commission about what community involvement efforts that the City of Sisters does. And throughout that discussion and review, we kind of gathered some recommendations from the Planning Commission for areas for improvement for our community involvement efforts. So I'm here to request you, the City Council's consideration of these Planning Commission recommendations. Just to give a little background, why are we talking about community involvement and what role does the Planning Commission have in our community involvement efforts? It all starts with the Oregon Land Use statewide planning goals, in which number 1 is citizen involvement. And this goal sets the priority for communities to develop a citizen involvement program that ensures the opportunity for citizens to be involved in all phases of the planning process. And this includes opportunities for widespread public involvement, effective two-way communication with the public, making technical information easy to understand, having feedback mechanisms between policymakers and public people giving public input, and ensuring that there is adequate financial support for these public involvement efforts. So where the Planning Commission comes into play here is that through the comprehensive plan, we've identified the Planning Commission as the Committee for Community Involvement. They are responsible for implementing the community involvement program that the City of Sisters is obligated to have. And on November 2nd, we had our first annual review of, well, not the first, but we held our annual review of the city's public involvement tools and processes in order to report and provide recommendations to the City Council of areas for improvement. So what are the planning processes that we need to ensure community involvement opportunities for? These planning processes tend to be categorized into either long-range planning projects or current planning projects. I'm sure many of you have either heard about or even participated in our recent long-range planning projects, such as the Sisters Country Vision, Comprehensive Plan, Housing and Land Efficiency Measures, as well as the Dark Skies Text Amendment, which is on the docket for the agenda tonight as well. So these long-range planning projects have a greater citywide impact, and that's why it is so important to use a variety of community outreach strategies and tools in order to hear from as many cross sections of the community as possible, so that when we're developing these long-range planning projects that do have a citywide impact, that we have a good understanding and guidance from the community on where we take these projects. So these pictures are an example from the comprehensive plan, community outreach. This is, an in-person tabling event where this is just one tool in our toolkit of community outreach strategies to gather community input for long-range planning projects. So to focus more on current planning projects, these tend to be the master plan developments, partitions and subdivisions, maybe an ADU permit or short-term rental permits that you might hear about. And along with the long-range planning projects, current planning projects in particular have these specific land use noticing procedures that tend to be tiered with different levels of noticing procedures as outlined in our development code. So when it comes to type 1 land use applications that we might get, these would be like an ADU permit, sign permit, short-term rental permit. There are no noticing requirements that the city has other than noticing the people who submit the application. When it comes to a type 2 land use application we might receive, these are the site plan review, minor variance, a partition. So let's say there's a vacant lot that someone wants to put a new building on. There are some noticing procedures that would be engaged, such as notice to neighbors within at least 250 feet would be mailed notice of this land use application proposal, along with posting of a bright yellow sign on that property so that even if someone might not be getting a notice in the mail, if they drive by that lot on a frequent basis, they should see that yellow sign as a symbol of, hey, something's being proposed to happen here. Maybe I should call the city and ask, what's this yellow sign on this lot? Moving on to type 3 land use applications. These are the master plan or subdivision proposals. This is where we engage all layers of noticing procedures, such as mailing notice, posting that yellow notice sign on the property, in addition to publishing notice in the Nugget newspaper so that a broader range of people in the community have the opportunity to know that this land use action is being proposed and when to get involved and how to get involved so that they can participate in this current planning project. Then when it comes to our type 4 types of applications, this is more of our long-range planning projects for comprehensive plan amendments, code text amendments, and so on. So that's kind of a condensed version of what we presented to the Planning Commission on November 2nd. And I'm going to go through what sort of feedback we got about our community involvement strategies. Before I get into the details, I'm going to pause, see if you have any questions or anything that you want to touch on before I move forward.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? You can. No, it looks like we're good.
Okay. So covering the first feedback item we got, it was about neighborhood meetings. And I'll start just by reading the code item that this is related to. So for noticing, or not, I'm sorry, not noticing procedures, but when we get a land use application, the code outlines specific code criteria and procedures for how we administer that application. And in that chapter, there's this section of the code about neighborhood meetings, and I'll just read it now. Applicants are encouraged to meet with adjacent property owners and neighborhood representatives prior to submitting their application in order to solicit input and exchange information about the proposed development. In some cases, the community development director or designee may require the applicant to meet with adjacent property owners or neighborhood representatives prior to accepting an application as complete. So what this means for a planning staff member is that, let's say we have someone contact us and say, hey, I'm getting ready to submit a subdivision proposal. I just want to make sure I'm all prepared to submit a complete application. We might say, let's say we have the feeling that maybe a neighborhood meeting would be an important tool for this application. We might ask that, hey, can you reach out to the neighbors, kind of get their input and inform them of this application prior to you submitting your proposal to the city formally. And what this does is this gives a developer an opportunity to have a more open dialogue with those neighbors, to educate them, and potentially have a discussion on the design itself and what impacts that might have on the neighbors so that they can consider feedback from the neighbors for what would be better, more compatible with the surrounding area, or at least having multiple opportunities to inform the community might help them garner public support. And the whole impetus for considering neighborhood meetings as a more regular tool that staff enforces, because right now we don't really enforce it. It's only on a, I think I've only used neighborhood meetings in the sense of requiring someone pursuing a major variance. I've asked them to send a letter to the neighbors around their property to make sure that they're informed of this proposal before they submit an application to me. And that seemed to be helpful. But otherwise, it's not something we use frequently. And when it comes to these more complex and high impact development proposals, neighborhood meetings might be an opportunity for developers to have discussions about things that are being brought up during public hearings and public testimony. Because in staff's role and in planning commission's role, when we get a proposal, we aren't able to say, oh, you know what, we think that this would be more compatible, or you should design it this way. Our job is to accept an application as it's given to us, and we see if it meets code. It's not up to us to say, well, I think this would meet the code even better if you did this. So I think these neighborhood meetings would be a way for neighbors to have that dialogue directly with the developer outside of a public hearing process. And hopefully that might make public hearings more effective and more efficient so that there isn't the risk of a development review going on for months longer than it might have to with someone who pursued a neighborhood meeting initially. So I'm here to, I guess, suggest or share the feedback from the planning commission that maybe we create an internal policy or amend the code to enhance those parameters of when staff knows to enforce that neighborhood meeting requirement. So I'm going to stop there. Any thoughts on this so far?
Yes, Counselor Cobb.
It seems to me that if it's a type 4 and maybe even a type 3, that it should be required to always have a neighborhood meeting of some sort for all impacted neighbors. The reading I've done in the past 7-9 months or whatever it is, I've come upon these statements every once in a while that development projects are always much more successful when the community is involved, even though it might take longer. So I just want to put that little bit in there.
Thank you.
I think that read these through the other day, and it struck me that some sort of clarification is probably beneficial not only to an individual who's applying for development or whatever else. I think would be beneficial to staff. I think that right now we leave too much on the staff to try to determine what the best way to gather information is. And realistically, that's probably falls within our purvey to be a little more direct about what we expect and what we don't. I'm not sure what it looks like, but it does seem to me in reading it over that maybe it's a little soft.
And that's what code is for, right? I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
So codifying something or creating an internal policy that's published, I guess, would probably be something I support as well. I mean, I don't want to hammer the point home, where we feel like we have to look at everything, but anything that encourages a little more public input is probably a good idea as we grow. I mean, I just think it's we're going from a small town to a larger town, and I know we're not trying to grow fast or anything like that, but we are growing. And while we're doing that, we need to bring with us our public input ideas so everybody knows what's going on. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
I agree that this is something that we should look at, and I look forward to having the planning department come up with suggestions about when that level of action should take place, because on the one hand, we don't want to burden very minor applications with notification requirements, but on the other hand, you don't want to hear, well, shoot, this was halfway on its way and I didn't even know it was happening and I have property right next door. So we have to find the sweet spot where it's worthwhile having it done, but not a burden that is unnecessary.
Okay,
Yeah,
everybody's nodding. Go ahead.
well, yeah, I agree. Yeah, because I was just want a clarification. I mean, is is this type 1 through 4, or did you have an idea, or did the group have an idea of this would be like type 3 and 4, or?
It's a great question. I think internally of staff, we were trying to come up with what that threshold would be. Because, I hear Counselor Cobb mention, type 4 should always have a, notice to neighbors, or I'm sorry, neighborhood meetings, and then maybe even type 3. And so that's kind of where we were thinking of, like, maybe not all type 3s trigger a neighborhood meeting requirement, but then if it's not all of them, then how is that objective and replicable for, future applications we get? So we're not quite sure yet, but I think we're getting a sense of what your feeling would be of what when a neighborhood meeting should be required.
Okay,
Thank you.
I think we're good there.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the second feedback item, the Planning Commission had noticed that there might be a need for more education about the history of Sisters and how we've developed and gotten to where we are today. Because we have such a great growing community and with so many newcomers who don't understand our recent context of rapid growth and how zoning started, Oregon land use law in general. It would be great context to kind of give to our newcomers so that when they show up to our public hearings or at any meeting, really, they have that understanding of Sisters history and development. So one action item was the suggestion that maybe we have a history of development in Sisters presentation held as a C4C event, or staff internally draft a history memo and include that on the city website for easy access for anyone. Any thoughts on this one?
I think it's a good idea. Well, the good thing about history is you can document it. You really only have to do it once. And then from then on, you're just kind of adding to it. So having some kind of elevator speech sized history lesson on a website is not a terrible idea. And it's probably not a bad idea to once in a while at certain points to have maybe a presentation or two every year or two.
I think that it's, as a standalone C4C event, it probably is weak. But as a part of a larger event where we're doing other things, we want to provide information. I think that's perfect, but I like the idea of the quote elevator speech, the short sort of a synopsis of how we got to where we are today. And that is things like the sewer installation, annexations, when they were annexed and why, and how the code affects all that would be helpful.
And if we're gonna have these classes that are gonna be available to people interested in understanding the community and becoming a leader in the community, then this would be great
Perfect.
information to have available. So I don't have any problem with it either.
Carrie, what is that program called the next year or later this?
The Civic Leadership Academy. though.
Civic Leadership Academy.
Civic Leadership.
So that's a good place for pieces of that, I think, for sure.
And Emmy, do you know of any place we could also add just, if there's any sort of PowerPoint or video or anything out there, just explaining Oregon land use laws in kind of a interesting or succinct way to, so
Interesting.
we don't necessarily, yeah, interesting. So we don't have to, we don't have to recreate that. I would assume there's something like that out there that we could just also post to the website or have available.
Link, maybe.
Great. Yeah, I'm thinking of a couple areas where that might already be covered, or maybe there was like a presentation done in Bend, I think last year, about the history of Oregon's land use. And that was a pretty good lecture series back last year. So yeah, I'm sure we could use some existing resources that are already out there.
And I would like to add that I think using the CLA to maybe do the research and create a pamphlet, sort of like the Sisters Vision pamphlet that could be readily available. And along with maybe a back page or two of the Oregon land use laws. I think you're correct, Counselor Letts, that I'm pretty sure there's a brief image of that, how it goes from one point A to point B. So it might be something that we could engage with CLA and offer a,
As a project.
as a project and offer a, some kind of funding for it. I don't know.
All right, Emmy, is that enough feedback?
Yeah, that's great. And then I'm hearing the acronym CLA. Is that the Civic Leadership Academy?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, moving on to feedback item number 3. There were a few mentions that of different topics that I think fell into this category of creating more informal opportunities for the public to get to listen to and engage with the city council and staff. So these more informal opportunities could be Q&A sessions, or maybe more like a fireside chat, in order to help facilitate two-way conversation between city council and the public. Another public comment that we got at that planning commission workshop was someone saying when they come to visitor communications and they provide their testimony, they feel like they wish they had the opportunity to receive feedback or a response from council in the moment. But oftentimes, I think what happens, people show up to visitor communications, they say what they want to say, and then once visitor communications ends, shortly after they leave. And I think they're missing that opportunity for the follow-up that city council tends to do at the end of the agenda, when there's more informal discussion that happens at the end of a city council meeting. So I'm not sure what this would look like, but closing that communication loop for people who bring up topics during visitor communications and are looking for a response but might not get it as quickly as they had thought. And another public comment that we received was that the joint workshop meeting between the planning commission and the city council seemed to be really well received, mostly due because the person who brought this up at public comment said that they really appreciated the opportunity to, one, hear an introduction to these big topics like the UGB amendment, and to hear their representatives have a dialogue about this, ask questions in a less formal format. And it made you guys seem more human. Not that you're not, you're volunteers who represent the community, but it was a good way to have the public get to know you and get to know these big topics that are going on, that the city's trying to take on. So the action item here is to bring these ideas to you, see if you have any ideas for how you can connect with the community or our community constituents in a more informal manner, and as well as supporting staff and making opportunities to kind of have that same informal discussion with the community as well.
Okay.
I think that is a perennial issue.
Sure.
Since the 1980s, I've been going to governmental entities and giving testimony and receiving no response whatsoever unless I followed up.
Yeah. And
wondering, why is it that way? Well, now I kind of understand why it is that way. What I always recommend to people that, ask about that is, you're going to the wrong meeting. You need to go to the work sessions. That's where the discussion and the explanation happens. That's where we ask our questions of staff, which are many of your same questions, and we get the answers, and then we hear your testimony, and then we make a decision.
Yeah.
And that would help delineate what their questions are for them. And they could then contact the appropriate staff person or an individual council person.
Right. I mean, you can hear it in the workshop. You can fly off an email, and that's way earlier than waiting until the day that we're voting on something.
Until a public hearing or, the actual vote is taking place.
So I agree with that. It's a little, I'm a little disappointed because people don't want to wait from visitor communication at 6:30 till 7:45 to 8:15 when we finally get to the point in the meeting where we talk about it. But our city council meetings are structured that way. So we hear visitor communications before we get to the agenda and start voting on things. And then when we're done doing the business, that's when we have time at the end to kind of get a little more informal, and that's just kind of how meetings are. And I don't.
We don't always talk about the issues.
No, we don't. I try to once in a while. I mean, I don't do it every
Right,
time, but
there's no guarantee that
Well,
that is
no.
going.
Um,
Go ahead.
I think sometimes we direct staff to follow up with what has been stated in the open sessions where people have the opportunity to say, can we get more information on this? Maybe move it to a workshop. I mean, I think that I'm going to digress just a little bit. Having worked with school boards for 35 years, having been on a special district board for 15 years, as well as this, that's the way all these meetings run. And the main reason is that if you have 35 or 40 people in the room who wish to give input, it's important to hear it. But if you start getting into the dialogue at that point in time, the agenda never gets accomplished. You're here till, I've been in school board meetings where they've done that and been there till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I am not kidding. And it more than once. And so I think that it is beneficial, maybe, and you stated very clearly, hey, if you want, we're gonna probably discuss this at the end of the meeting, stick around, you'll hear what we've got to say. But I also think that it does point to the fact that the way, the formality of this type of a meeting, the actual city council meeting, doesn't lend itself well to sort of a community engagement. It feels like we aren't listening, and we are. It feels like we're not willing to give you information. And and it's distressing to me, but I don't see how we can change the meeting format. We have to figure out a way to be more effective in communicating what our decisions are, whether it's going to staff or whatever. And I think there is a responsibility for people who come with a legitimate complaint or a non-legitimate complaint for that matter, to stick around to the end of the meeting and hear what we got to say. It's a two-way street.
What do you want to say?
Yeah, I think to add to that, it's on one side, it's, we are in technology age. So you don't even have to stick around to the end of the meeting. You can
listen.
You can go home and listen. You can bring it up online the next day. Fast forward to that part, so you don't have to sit through everything you don't want to sit through. There is that opportunity. When people approach me with that same question, I always suggest, I think the best way is to email everybody or email a specific counselor maybe, and then start the dialogue that way. Cause then it's just more of a dialogue and you can meet in person or email. But yes, there is a gap between that knowledge. I understand why we run the meetings the way we do. And I don't have a huge problem with that, but I certainly understand the issue. And I think I'm going to say this with a lot of your other recommendations or action items, Emmy, is I was reading through them and thinking, well, we are hiring a recorder / communications person. And I was hoping that that's something that person is going to be able to take on or certainly assist with. And maybe if we don't have the ideas, hopefully they do. I have high hopes for that position. So, because I do want more communication. I came on to council, in the middle of COVID. So, my first year or two, there wasn't communication. There wasn't even face to face, and so I had kind of gotten this habit of, oh, this is how things are, but it's not really supposed to be how things are. And I would like to get out, face to face with the community more, and your fireside chats, for your FDR fans, or something like that. I know some of us have talked about trying to set up, in a coffee shop or something like office hours or something like that, which I'm all for. I don't know if we've had a lot of traction of actually implementing that, but that's all I got.
Councilor Cobb?
Yeah, so I agree with the discussion on the lack of interactive engagement when people come and speak when we're doing a general meeting. And it's understandable because it's Robert Rules of Order and you want the meeting to conduct itself, and you can't have a lot of back and forth because as Mayor was saying, we can't get our work done. And I also agree that sometimes answers are made at the end of the meeting. And I also want to note that sometimes during the meeting, we have the right to interrogate, ask a question of the speaker if we need a clarification. Sorry about the word interrogate. It's the beast that it is. But there are possibilities, and I think we are looking at doing town halls. I think we did one recently. The city did. Is that not true? Didn't we just do one?
We are doing one on January 22nd.
Okay, so that's gonna help satisfy that, I believe. It's gonna be more like the joint meetings with the planning commission and council. And so I think that's a really good step in the right direction.
Yeah, I
So
think,
that's all I have to say.
yeah, I think everybody's kind of saying the same thing a little bit differently, but we're informal meetings, great. Can I suggest beers with the mayor? Would be a good idea.
As long as you pay.
Yeah, I have to pay for my own. But yeah, I mean, I think you got it on that one.
I think during our goals, we can revisit the idea of first Tuesday of the month, a counselor will be available at the coffee shop. And if you gotta want to come and jog or, we can consider it.
Yeah, and many of us are all, available on our own and,
Right.
if we need to formalize that a little bit, just so people know when or whatever and where, or
Yeah.
that's okay.
We have to be sure we know who's when and where, so we don't have more than two of us there.
Right. We need to formalize our informal meetings.
Yeah.
apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, Emmy, go ahead. Sorry.
No, no worries. Thank you. Yeah, that was funny. Formalize your your personal time almost. Okay. Moving on to feedback item number 4. So this one was about the formation of neighborhood districts. This was a recommendation from one of the planning commissioners where, we have these public hearings where 10 to 12, or not 10 to 12, 10 to 20 people might be showing up, all from the same little neighborhood or area expressing similar sentiments. And I guess the impetus for considering designating neighborhood districts would be, instead of having 10 to 20 people kind of saying the same concerns at these hearings, maybe we have a neighborhood representative who kind of gathers that input from their neighborhood area, that broader group of people, and come to our public hearings and express that. Maybe it's only 1 or 2 representatives that come up and speak then, instead of the 20 people. So it might be a good tool to make our public hearings more efficient and more effective at gathering input from the community. But it also might be a useful tool for council to use in order to coordinate regular meetings with different neighborhood representatives of those districts, in order to have an open dialogue, educate about what's going on in the city, answer any questions, and again, have more informal opportunities to hear those community concerns. So I just wanted to share that idea with you all and see if you want to direct staff to investigate the feasibility of designating neighborhood districts or associations at this point in time.
Yeah, Gary, go ahead.
Of all the proposals that were in there, this one is my least favorite. I think we're a small town. I don't think we need to start chopping the town into chunks. We're not Bend, where we need to have a lot of different areas that designate actually the historical aspect of each area of the town. I also think that we'll have the same number of people here with the same concerns, whether we have a representative from a neighborhood district or not, because we're a small town. And I think the issues that ignite people and bring them to us to express their concerns are there. And gather in mind that oftentimes we'll have 60 or 70 people in the room expressing concern about something. They don't live in Sisters. They're not in one of our neighborhood districts. They live outside the city limits, but they're in here to express their concerns about how it might affect the city or something.
Or the
like that.
businesses or the schools or
the
whatever.
schools. And so I would hate to see us try to chop the town into chunks. And then you start to get to the areas that have neighborhood associations like down here at Pine Meadow or some of the others where they actually have an HOA and other areas where they don't want an HOA, don't want to look like an HOA, and don't want to act like an HOA. So I think I'm not real comfortable with this one.
I don't even really like it too much myself. And the reason I say that is because you just said the words directing staff to do something, and I'm just thinking that the lift is bigger than the outcome right now.
Yep.
If it was citizen led and, you know, the citizens wanted to like kind of make these little areas, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I don't see you kind of said it the same way I was gonna say it, which is of all the things on the list, this is kind of the one that was like, you know, it's not a terrible idea, but I just think maybe it's 10 years too early or something, kind of. Anyway, go ahead. That's just me.
I am on the fence. There is part of me that's like, we're a little town, you know.
Yeah.
We don't need to do that. I do see value in, honestly, as a feedback loop of having a representative from a neighborhood, you know, that's kind of semi-formal that the city has a relationship with, or council, or at least designated. So somebody to go to kind of, not even go to, but maybe even get information kind of up to us. You know, the good old fashioned, a little more reliable way than social media has turned into. I would rather hear information coming through that kind of conduit instead of, you know, rants online, which I don't ever look at anyway. So, I see value there. But yeah, the part of me is yeah, again, it's like, well, that's great for Redmond or Bend. But we have to be cognizant because, you know, in the same breath, a couple minutes ago, we said we are small, but we are growing. So, forward looking, you know, again, not a bad idea, but I'm not 100% sold on it.
So, I have a negative and a positive reaction. My negative reaction was initially, well, okay, we would probably have districts that isolate the homeowners associations from those that are not. And then I thought, well, on a positive note, if we just divided the city north, south, east, and west, we'd have a northeast, a northwest, a southeast, and a southwest section that could expand out into the sisters country. So if something's being developed in the northwest, then any property in that area could, you know, be seen as a community that could comment on this particular development. So it's a possibility, it seems to me, but kept at a very simplified level so that when you do divide into a district, you're getting a group of people. Like if it was in the southeast, or excuse me, west, you would have Pine Meadow, you'd have part of this school district, you'd have, you know, a good combination of variety. So that's my thought on that.
I agree that I don't want to say, oh, okay, you have to get with your group and you have to have a spokesperson and you all have to agree. And because there's no indication that everybody in a community that testifies is testifying the same. There is that occasional situation where that is the case, but I talk to many people who come to the meetings, the hearings that don't testify, and they often are not testifying because somebody's already said it, or they disagree. They're in the same community, but they don't agree. So I don't think forcing people to say, well, you've got to have one or two spokespersons, so you have to come up with something. Where it did spark some interest, and maybe this is more towards what Susan was saying, is it would be useful to have some sort of a geographic grouping, in the sense that when we do outreach for, say, the fire hazard issues, where we do outreach for that we're going to need to do about dark skies. Do we just do that as, you know, the whole town all at once, you know, or would it be easier to have regions and districts and whatever to work with? And maybe it would. There is some similarity of interest in those regions where they do have homeowners associations. Where they don't, like you said, there's probably a lot of people in there that do not want to be grouped in with everybody else in that region and don't want, but I can see some advantage to that grouping, but not necessarily in the way that it's being proposed. So yeah, I don't think we've got a real positive consensus that that's a good way to go.
Okay, Amy, you have enough there?
That's great, thank you.
Okay.
Moving on to feedback item number 5. These were some topics brought up that I've categorized under expanding our public outreach tools and strategies. One of them being social media. I know the City of Sisters has a Facebook account that we use for certain announcements like, City Hall's closed on Monday. And from my experience using the city Facebook, it doesn't seem to get a lot of engagement. I haven't used it in the recent years, but I think, Carrie, it's been about the same. Would that be accurate?
Correct.
Okay. And when I first started working here, we had kind of dipped our toe into using Instagram as a social media platform. Didn't seem to get any greater outreach than our city Facebook. So I think that's why we stuck with that at that point in time. But one suggestion that we were considering was the use of short videos, maybe videos that are 60 seconds or less, in order to convey important information to the community. So these videos could be used for, kind of featuring a staff or city staff member and what kind of projects they're working on, kind of provide that almost face-to-face contact of putting a face to the name and kind of having a more informal opportunity to educate the community about what the city is up to. But I'm open to hearing about other social media ideas that you think we could be considering, should be considering, or maybe just due to the nature of what Sisters is, social media isn't the pathway for us to really put more energy towards. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
I think that the new position that's going to be filled is going to help with this, because I think that they're going to be, tasked with pieces of this. And I think having that those extra hours that we don't have right now, to do some of this will be helpful. But unless I'm wrong, I don't think anybody's against to continue to try some of these strategies. I just don't, I don't think we put all of our eggs in this basket, but I think that there's certain things we can do to do it a little better as we get a little more knowledgeable about what the best strategies are. But I don't think anybody's against it, right? So
No, I think that it's, the most active one right now is Nextdoor, and if you want to get a negative view of the community, just spend a lot of time on Nextdoor. That's where everybody wants to gripe goes, and then they gripe at each other about griping at each other. So it's an interesting sort of a vicious circle. It really doesn't say much of anything, except for the people that really try to and then get told how stupid they are. But yeah, maybe we need to get our city manager to do TikTok videos, but I think that there are some opportunities. And as much as I'm not a big fan of X, formerly Twitter, since it's made its change, something popped up on my Twitter feed the other day from the school district about, we're gonna have school 2-hour delay. So they're using all these different sorts of push things, knowing that their clientele is probably spending time there, whether we like it or not, or don't like it personally. So I think that's something that when we bring that new person in, that would be a good thing to look at and explore where we can go.
I think the only way we're going to make an impact on social media is if we provide something that people want that they can't get anywhere else. And I'm not real sure what that would be and how we would do it, because otherwise there's just so much out there going on that is delicious to many people in different ways. That
if we had a City of Sisters dance Instagram,
yeah,
that might do it, something like that.
Yeah,
So
I'm not so.
but I think that, again, just because we haven't figured out the
Right.
best way doesn't mean
Right.
we need to throw it out, right?
I mean,
Exactly
if
right.
we want to hold a lottery you know, and if you check in every morning and then you get, your name gets thrown in and then you get to,
You know, maybe we
Bring
get a high
something.
school kid to say, hey, do you want to help us out with this? And man, you never know. That's the kind of thing. where
right, I
someone
mean. if
Just
somebody-
might set something on fire, not real fire, sorry.
What we doing?
Okay,
Oh, yeah, we need to, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And I think you want to say something too.
Yeah, real quick.
Okay, so, Amy, on the, short videos, I'm a fan. I've seen them with other cities and, it's a good way for a city to, capture answers to a bunch of questions coming in from the community to the city. Whether it's the mayor or the city manager just making some statements or interviewing, you know, the, chief of police at the time or whatever. It just is a really quick way to get the information out, and it's just on our website. I am not in favor of social media because social media is constantly changing. We've got Mastodon and Blue Sky and, you know, I mean, we don't need to be there. And it's such an fluctuating thing that I think it would be a waste of resources to do that.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I think, yeah, anything like social media, Facebook, it's kind of what you make of it as, Counselor Blum was referring to. I mean, if we want to drive the narrative, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but just if we push out a lot of good content, then people will get used to knowing that, okay, this is the place to go to get the information, but because we haven't been at, that is not, we're not the place to get information. So, I mean, that's something for the new communications person, I think, to chew on. But the other thing with social media is that you have to babysit it, maintain it, and
Yes.
answer questions and respond, and
Good change.
that takes time and money, yeah, so, but yeah, I think, and I like the video idea.
Okay, there you go.
Just to make sure, am I running over time right now?
We're, it's not, but a little, but it's not your fault. It's
It's not
ours.
your fault.
Yeah.
Nope, I'm almost done, so that's good.
Okay,
And I just to kind of wrap up these other items, you know, Counselor Ross, you mentioned Nextdoor, you know, that was one of the third-party websites to use to exchange information, solicit feedback, maybe not the best tool. And then I think Counselor Cobb, you mentioned you like how other communities are using short videos for disseminating information. That kind of touches on this third bullet of assessing strategies used by other communities, seeing what their best practices are, what's working for them, and what might be feasible for the City of Sisters to consider using. So you guys kind of touched on those other items too.
And I would just add that I'm on Nextdoor every day, not because I love it, because in fact, my blood pressure goes up every time I'm on it, but I want to know what's rumbling out there, this false, fake, and is likely to show up at the next city council meeting. So it's good for that purpose.
Well, better you than us.
All right. Well, I'm gonna move on to the last feedback item, which was to audit the comprehensive plan for implementation of policies into the Sisters Development Code. And this item was brought up when, you know, we've heard these comments from both people from the public, but also our planning commissioners noticing that, you know, there is somewhat of a disconnect between the comprehensive plan policies and the development code provisions. And the reason for this is that we just adopted our comprehensive plan. It's a 20-year plan that's meant to be implemented over a period of many years. And so with this being adopted in 2021, it's now 2024. We've done some text amendments over the last few years, and we will continue to do more. But the other area where there might be a misunderstanding of why aren't we implementing these comprehensive plan policies when we're getting these subdivisions or master plan developments that, you know, do have a large impact on the community. But it's just that our development code hasn't yet caught up with our comprehensive plan policies. And oftentimes current planning projects, such as those master plan developments and subdivisions, aren't required to comply with the comprehensive plan policies. So that's where it's important for us and the council, and I'm sure you guys do this, to help educate the public about when it's important to get involved. So when we're having these text amendments being proposed, this is their opportunity to participate, provide comments, or listen in, because that's how the comprehensive plan policies are implemented into the development code. And it's the development code that ultimately shapes what the future of Sisters looks and feels like. So I'm going to acknowledge that auditing the comprehensive plan, this is already a city council goal for 2023 and 2024. Staff plans to audit the comprehensive plan with the planning commission, highlight the policies that could result in amendments for the development code, and review those with the city council for direction on which to prioritize first. So any feedback on this?
Good.
Thumbs up.
I mean, it's funny. I mean, people ask me all the time, hey, have you read the comprehensive plan? I'm like, I was on the committee to help put it together and we signed it as the mayor. So yeah, I know a little bit about the comprehensive plan. So, we use it all the time. I carry it around with me, when I have extra space in my vehicle. And, yeah, we look at it all the time. I mean, we're always going back to it. We know staff does as well. This is auditing it. It's one of our goals. We want to always be looking at it and, just, making sure that we're headed in the right direction, and good job. Let's audit it. So, yep. Anybody else have anything to say on that one? That was the easy one. So that was a cakewalk right there. If,
You're already doing it.
there you go.
Yay.
All right, anything else?
No, that's it. You can reach out to Scott, myself, or Matt Martin about if you guys have any questions about community involvement or anyone from the public who'd like to follow up with us after the meeting.
Yeah, not to overstress things, but beers with the mayor, okay? Thank you. We appreciate you very much. Thank you for being here.
No, he's pulling the mayor card.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right,
Thank you.
good job. All right, on to our second item of the workshop, which is discuss 2024 city council calendar. Assistant City Manager Prosser.
So it's pretty straightforward, and really, I just want to open it up to discussion with the council. We know the second meeting in November is on the 27th, which is the day before Thanksgiving. We've got Christmas Day is actually a council day. And then things to consider in March, occasionally council has taken a break for spring break if people have wanted to do that. And then over the past few years, council has also taken a break in the summer for one meeting. And I've listed a couple options out if you guys would like to discuss those. In some cases, it's in November and December. There's a clear space where it looks like we can add another meeting in or do it in the third or fourth week. It wasn't as clear in this year on that calendar. And I would say for my recommendation for if council does decide to cancel the two meetings, the Thanksgiving and Christmas, that perhaps we actually leave those dates open dependent upon what the workload looks like in those months, with the ability to add a date back in as needed. But that is completely up to you, and I'll let you discuss what you'd like to do.
Can you remind me on the July dates, which ones you had there?
So we looked at the three that I put out for the summer was either the
Oh.
July 10th, the July 24th, or the August 14th.
Okay, so when I was checking it out, I realized that if we took the 24th, we'd actually have 4 weeks off. And it's the only one that would give us 4 weeks. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. That would be my choice.
November, we did first and third instead of second and fourth.
Oops.
That sounded like a gavel.
Boy,
Yeah.
I think you just
Sold.
emphasized your point.
Yes, these will give us 2 weeks.
As we grow, our body of work gets bigger. So I'm okay with doing first and third on November. How's that go with the second October meeting and the first November meeting?
Yes.
I
What's-
would say a week and a half, so there's basically the same type of break as normal.
Similar. I think I can skip Christmas every year. The second December meeting, we slow down anyway.
Yeah.
November, I like that, not eliminating that meeting. It seemed like this last November, we were pretty darn busy.
Yep.
So I'm okay with moving those meetings to the first and third just for this calendar year.
First and third.
First and third week of November.
Oh, gotcha. The 6th and the 20th.
The month
Yeah.
before has 5 Wednesdays, so we don't end up
we're not too close together on the second meeting of October and the first meeting of November. So I'm okay with that. Is everybody okay with that and
Yes.
Christmas?
And Christmas,
good with
yes.
Okay, but everybody's okay with that for now?
I think it's a smart move.
Okay,
Okay,
so summertime and spring break. Let's talk about spring break. I have a kid who is going to get those 2 weeks off, and I may go do something, but I don't think that the city has to shut down for the mayor. How about you? You're the other person with children.
Right. Yeah, that would be important to me, but there's a lot of staff that have kids too, so.
Well, so what do you think? Do you want to take?
What's
It's
that?
it's our crazy season, so it's
March is-
planning and budget's coming and,
well, we could move those two up.
no,
Spring break's 2 weeks.
spring break's 2 weeks, so
Oh.
We collaborate either
we
way.
either plan it and have a meeting and maybe one or two of us aren't here, or we just take it off the schedule.
We do have leap day.
We have one?
We have leap day. We have an extra day this year, so
Oh.
we should
Oh,
really
okay.
leverage that.
We'll just keep adding it to the next
Yeah,
month
yeah.
until we get to where we need it.
What, what do you think staff position is on a spring break? I mean,
I'm neutral. I don't know if Joe has input.
neutral is neutral, which means either way is good,
She's
right?
got kids.
Yeah, I know.
Joe's got kids.
I know.
Yeah.
He
So-
shrugged though. He's being non-committal.
Yeah.
I don't care either way.
I can understand that if we're gonna do it, we need to do it ahead of time so people can plan their vacation time.
Right.
And that's important.
My thought is this, if it looks like we're gonna have two counselors not here, or a mayor and a counselor, but the two
Yeah.
of you not here, it then makes it tough to have a meeting if somebody's sick or something. I guess you could keep it on the books.
But then that doesn't help staff.
That doesn't help staff. So I'm okay with the decision one way or the other. It means that we just have to work harder and
Well, there's a chance I might not go anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right. I mean, same thing for me. I might be here.
or work around it, so,
So tell me when the March break is in again?
it's
It's
the last 2 weeks.
Last 2 weeks. So I mean, if we were to do the same thing we did in November, make it the 6th and the 20th, then you could.
20th
Two
is-
weeks.
it's
it's
week
2
break.
weeks.
So,
I understand that, but it's at the beginning, it's the beginning week, and then you have several weeks before the next
It
meeting.
wouldn't be as hard for people to plan the vacation after the 20th.
Right,
I think we have it or we don't.
I agree.
okay.
I'm
What are
o-
you talking about for summer?
Well, why don't, yeah,
So did we decide on March? What are we
No,
doing?
I was just wondering, are we just talking about, we do have 5 Wednesdays in July.
I like taking the one off in summer, me personally.
Yeah.
I've taken advantage of that every year.
But I think that's for
Take
staff.
that one, then we can-
No, it's more for staff,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, but I like to take advantage of it, I'm not gonna lie. And have a little time off in the summer. It's the beginning of the fiscal year, things are ramping up, but it's not the end of the world, you know what I mean? So pick a date, I don't,
It doesn't matter to me.
what are our choices in the summer?
July
10th,
10th,
24th.
July 24th, or August 14th.
The second one in July is the one we kind of traditionally have been doing. So July 24th, is everybody okay with just,
And that's the one that gives you the most days.
Well.
that's for staff.
I think I counted wrong.
I think you did too, but that's beside the point.
One, two, yeah, it doesn't give you any extra days. I
Okay,
lied.
so is
Yeah, we did
everybody okay
especially-
with the 24th, and that's great for staff so they can plan?
1, 2,
Yep.
it is 4 weeks.
24th, okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so
We're back to
24th,
spring.
we're out, and spring, you know what, I say leave it on the schedule, and you know what, we'll work around
And then
it
if
if we need
people,
to.
several people really have stuff they'd rather do, then we can look.
We'll
at
have our new
the
staff person doing the meetings by that time easily, so hopefully. And Carrie can take off if she wants to.
And Mayor, maybe we'll get so much done in the first meeting
You
of the
never know.
month, you know?
You know what, I don't plan it on the work, I plan it on what my family needs. I'll be dead honest with you.
I do
about
the
it,
same.
So,
So what I heard is
doing that.
no break in March. Take the July 24th meeting off, move November to the first and the third weeks, and take the Christmas meeting off. If that's what you're comfortable with, I'll bring it forward in the consent agenda at the next meeting.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
All right, there you go.
I consent,
We got done.
All right,
Creates problems, brouhaha.
but I have no agenda.
all right. We're gonna adjourn this meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Roll call carry, please.
Mayor Preden,
I'm here.
Council President Blum,
Here.
Councilor Ross,
Present?
Councilor Letts,
Here.
Councilor Cobb.
Here.
All right. Need an approval of the agenda. Need a motion and a second, please.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second?
You have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, good. Visitor communication.
So our first visitor is Madeline Stasco, who is online. I'm gonna have to. Madeline, I will. You are allowed to talk. So when you're ready, if you can introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. I think you might be discussing it tonight. I was just wanting to check in with any progress with taking care of the homeless for the shelter for the cold weather. And I looked at the agenda and I saw something on it, so you might be discussing it tonight.
We will be discussing a resolution declaring a state of emergency and a temporary shelter situation. So yes,
Okay, so thank you. I'll look forward to hearing it.
you're welcome. It'll be a little bit because it's the third item of 3.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you for,
Okay.
and thank you for being here.
Yeah, I learn a lot. I like these meetings. I learn a lot coming to them. So I appreciate it.
If you want a more informal meeting, I think any one of the 5 of us would meet with you in person and have a coffee or anything like that. And you're more than welcome to ask me personally if you'd like.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. We have another visitor communication
We do not at this point.
at this point? Okay.
I would move approval of the consent agenda.
I second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? I don't think so. All right, on to council business. Ordinance 536. This is a public hearing, so I have a script to go through. And it's a little lengthy, so I just wanted to warn you right at the very, very beginning. Okay, here it is. Had to find number 1 because it's number 1 of over a dozen things. It's 3 pages, okay? All right, this is the time set for a public hearing on city file number TA 22-03, an application for text amendments to section 2.15.2400 of the Sisters Development Code submitted by the City of Sisters. This meeting is now called to order. The conduct of the hearing will be as follows. Staff will make a presentation and councilors may ask questions to staff. Next would be the entry of additional correspondence received into the record. Then there will be opening the public hearing portion for testimony in the following order: testimony in support of the proposal, testimony in opposition to the proposal, and neutral testimony. Then there'll be questions of staff, if any, by city council. Then we will close the public testimony portion of the hearing and there will be no further testimony. Then we will have a discussion and decision made by the city council. Testimony will be accepted in person and remotely via Zoom. If you would like to speak, please provide your testimony after you are called. If you do not wish to provide testimony, please say no testimony after you are called. Any questions should be directed to me as the mayor. When you testify, please state your name and address for the record, and please speak clearly and loudly to ensure testimony is heard at this hearing as it is being recorded. Callers will be muted after their testimony concludes. At my discretion, I may limit testimony to 3 minutes per person, and let's just go ahead with that. I would encourage those wishing to speak to keep testimony concise and relevant to the issue before us this evening. It is encouraged to simply agree with a point made by another person instead of remaking the same point. For deliberations, the applicable substantive criteria are listed in the staff report. These are the criteria the city council must use in making this decision. All testimony and evidence must be directed toward these criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or other land use regulations that the person testifying believes apply to the decision. Testimony that is not directed towards applicable or potentially applicable approval criteria, even if a strong point, is ultimately not relevant. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city council to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may ask the city council to provide further opportunity to present additional relevant evidence or testimony that is within the scope of the hearing. At this time, I will ask if any counselor has any conflicts of interest. If so, please disclose the nature of the conflict and whether the member believes the conflict would preclude the member from objectively participating in these proceedings.
What if our lighting doesn't match the
I don't think,
ordinance?
no, as all five of us are homeowners, I think that you have lighting, and so I don't think that that precludes you from anything. I don't have any conflicts of interest or disclosures of such. Council President Blum, do you have any?
No.
Okay. Councilor Letts?
No conflicts.
Okay. Councilor Cobb?
No conflict.
Councilor Ross?
None.
Okay. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the ability of any counselor to hear this matter?
If anybody online at Zoom has any reason to challenge, please raise your hand. See none?
The script says commissioner. We should probably change that to counselor right there. All right. Staff may now present the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Good evening, everyone. I'm Scott Woodford, for the record, Community Development Director, and excited to bring forward to you tonight the hopefully the last last meeting in the long line of workshops and discussions on this topic. That topic is the dark skies ordinance, and you can see a good example of the type of lighting on the screen that we're trying to get to. Just the right amount of lighting in the right spot. So that's our goal. And I'm going to lead you through kind of some background on how we got there, how we got to where we are now, and where some of the details of the ordinance itself. So that because there's been some changes, I want to make sure that the council's up to speed on those. So you can see by the city file number, the number TA stands for text amendment. The number 22 in the middle is the actual year of the amendment or the file number, and so you can see how long this discussion has been going on. It's a big topic. It affects a lot of people, affects everybody in the community. We had to do a wholesale rewrite of the existing lighting ordinance, so it did take some time. We had to take a break halfway in between to turn our attention to some other bigger projects, but we never lost sight of the fact that we needed to get this done, and appreciate all the work of the Planning Commission and of the City Council and workshops providing input on the ordinance. So before I get started, I want to also welcome our consultant, who we brought on board about 5-6 months ago, I think, at this point. And that's John Barentine from Dark Sky Consulting, LLC. I think he's on the call. I can't see if he is or not, but he said he was. So welcome, John. And I just want to acknowledge his efforts and expertise in getting this ordinance to where it is tonight, and very valuable input. And so let's go forward. Why the changes? Well, the primary change was that the lighting ordinance that we currently have on the books was approved back in 2010. And you know how technology has changed in general in those years. Lighting itself has changed as well. And so our ordinance was woefully out of date. It referred to a lot of things in terms of watts instead of the more current term of lumen. And it also had some provisions in there that spoke to a sunset date on non-conforming lighting of being 2015. So there was a big need just on the basis of that alone to update the ordinance. Also playing a big role was community support for having stronger requirements in our code. There's a pretty active group of astronomers and stargazers in the community, including the high school has a really strong program led by Rima Givet, and you know, they had put on some community education efforts and had come to council several times, and really kind of opened the staff's eyes to you know, where we needed to be with the ordinance and some of the opportunities, including potentially getting certified as a international dark sky community. And then we heard a lot through the comprehensive plan process about the need for requirements that protect our night sky views and incentivize retrofitting of existing non-conforming lighting, and then making sure that lighting conforms with our city western design theme. And so that all kind of came together, and council recognized the importance of this change and made it a council goal for fiscal year 23-24. So in the process of putting this ordinance together, as I mentioned, it touches everyone in the community in some way. And so you know, when we're doing a comprehensive update of something like this, wanted to make sure that we got a lot of input from the people that will have to implement this. Some people, the groups that may have to make changes to their lighting in the future, business owners, residents. We had some legal review. You know, our code enforcement officer is somebody that's going to have to administer this, so it's important that we got his input. And then Astronomy Club was very active in providing feedback, and community members in general. And then, as I mentioned, Dark Skies Consulting, once we brought them on board, had a lot of great feedback as John has, you know, knowledge of quite a few different lighting ordinances out in the country and knowledge of best practices. So instrumental in helping make sure that ours conform to those same best practices. In terms of the community feedback, if I could just summarize it briefly, there was a strong drive to make sure that public lighting was subject to all the requirements that the private sector was going to be subject to. There was a support for retrofit of the Cascade Avenue lights after they were deemed to be not fully in conformance with our lighting ordinance and potentially a barrier to certification, dark sky certification. Curfews on string lighting and other regulations was a theme that we heard from those that commented, and a preference for a shorter time frame on the amortization period for non-conforming private lighting, and then obviously a support for that dark sky certification. About halfway through the process, the Planning Commission kind of said, let's take a time out and really kind of get what input we could get from the business community. You know, residents surely are affected by this. Maybe the business owners, given the scale of some of their properties and their operations, may be disproportionately impacted. So use that as an opportunity to check in with a cross section of different business owners and to get their ideas and feedback. And you know, uniformly, business owners were in support of protecting the dark skies. I think most people, if you asked in the community, are supportive of dark skies. Sometimes the devil's in the details, of course, and they wanted to make sure that the regulations, worked for their operations and had to be cost effective as well. And kind of drew our attention to the fact that safety of their employees and guests, sometimes around the clock or the middle of the night, was an important issue for them, and something that we maybe weren't incorporating into our draft ordinance as of yet. So including signage needing to be lit and being able to be seen at all times of the night for those businesses that are operating essentially 24 hours. There was more of a support for instead of having a hard time frame, a hard stop for amortization, more of a kind of a gentle phase out of when lights go out or need to be replaced. At that point, bringing them into conformance versus a strict timeline. Supported education first before enforcement, and string lights. They could see some need for regulation, but they also saw the need and in terms of the interest and the ambience that they provide, and they did support curfews on string lights to that effect. A lot of talk about dark sky certification that came about kind of early in the process, and staff noted that there was at least a reasonable interest amongst council to see what we could do to pursue certification. When you do that, there are certainly some requirements that are expected in return, elements that you need to have in your ordinance, minimum requirements that need to be incorporated, as well as community education and things of that nature before you could qualify. So the ordinance was written with that in mind. It's evolved somewhat over time. So we wanted to make sure that the ordinance that we're putting forward tonight was one that would meet the requirements. So I directed John to kind of doing an analysis of where our ordinance was, and he did some contact with the Dark Sky Association, some folks over there, and talked about where our ordinance was. And his conclusion was that we're meeting all but one of the requirements. And I think that one requirement is something that we can easily come up with, via city manager policy of some sort. And that's having a provision somewhere that clearly indicates where, when, and under what circumstances new publicly owned lighting, including street lighting, is warranted and will be permitted. So that's not something you necessarily have to have in your code. It's just a policy that needs to be in place. And so if you have any questions about that further, then John's here to answer those questions. But you can see on the slide some of the other elements that we do have incorporated into our ordinance that are requirements of the certification. And feel free to interrupt me with questions at any time along the process here. So bear with me here. I'm gonna kind of walk us through the ordinance. I know you've seen a lot of it. I want to make sure that that you do understand, everything in there, and that you're aware of potentially some changes that have occurred in the last 3 months since you last saw it at a work session, I believe in October. But starting out with the purpose section, every good ordinance in my mind has a purpose section at the beginning that really lays the kind of the groundwork for what follows. And as you can see up on the screen, there's 7 different kind of themes, that are underlie or underpin the ordinance itself. I won't go into all the detail there, but wanted to highlight that. Then in addition to that, there are some guiding principles of the ordinance. I think this is language that was, John, if you correct me if I'm wrong, but this was taken from the IDA ordinance, or maybe best practices. And I want to note that these are in the code, but they're not approval criteria. They just lend a little bit more insight into kind of the themes of the ordinance. And one is making sure that the lights are no more than they need to be. This is not meant to be a dark ground, no lighting kind of ordinance. It's just to target the light where it's supposed to be strategically, so that it's put where it needs to be and not seeping out into the sky. That it's the lowest level needed to accomplish the goal. I think we've all seen evidence or examples of, mostly in other communities, where the lighting is just way overdone and blinding almost, and way more than needed to accomplish what the purpose is. Thinking about controls, motion detectors, when available, is something we would encourage to property owners, if it works for them, is a great way to still have light when needed, but not on all the time. And then color, we'll talk a little bit about why color is important to lights, but essentially warmer color lights are better than the colder lights, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. Then we have a definition section, and most good ordinances have good definitions, and definitions become critically important when push comes to shove. We get challenged on things. It's essential to have really well written definitions, and this is one area where John was really helpful in terms of combing through our definitions and making sure that they made sense, and help provide some exhibits here. Some of the key definitions I think that you want to be aware of or draw attention to is downcast. You'll see the figure on the left is something in the code that we put in to show what downcast means. It means basically that the lighting fixture is parallel with the ground. I've seen property owners challenge provisions in other ordinances where lighting was kind of at an angle, and they were still making the case that it was downcast, and technically they maybe weren't wrong without a good definition. So important to have that in place. And then shielded lights, it kind of shows what a totally unshielded light looks like, one that's maybe downcast but not fully shielded, and you can still see how the light kind of is directed up above the horizontal plane. A good fully shielded light would not have any light directed up past the horizontal plane, and that's where you get light pollution. And then light trespass is another concept that we use, and basically light trespass is defined as if you can see the light source of the light from the property line, then that's considered to be light trespass. Again, feel free to, I'm going to hit you with a lot of information, so at any point along here, please feel free to jump in with questions.
Actually, Scott, there's a script, and we'll have all the questions at the next section. So sorry about that.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Applicability section, all lighting installed on or after the effective date of the ordinance is required to comply with the lighting ordinance. Even if it does not require filing of an application or issuance of a permit of approval. And that's just to basically mean that those folks that have their house or their building just the way they are, and they don't need any approval from the city. Well, the way the lighting ordinance is written is that it's still applicable to those folks as well. Here's a little interlude for some lighting 101. The 5 principles of responsible lighting. Shielded on the left there, downcast and shielded. The color temperature is an element that's important, and we'll talk about why. Brightness, maximum brightness is an important element, and then the timing. If it's off when it's not needed, or if it's on some type of motion detector. Again, here's the downcast and the fully shielded figures. So as mentioned, maximum brightness is a critical element of a good lighting ordinance. And so this section is meant to delineate what the allowances are for a single family dwelling unit, And then kind of increasing in density all the way to multifamily, and then talking about what the allowances are for mixed use and commercial, and then publicly owned lighting. I want to emphasize that the proposed lighting ordinance does require public lighting to meet the code. It just by nature has some slightly different standards, you know, that come into play just given its uniqueness. But what we're talking about here is measure a total allowance of lumens that a single family would have, or if they had an ADU, it could go up to 6,000 with a maximum light fixture of 850 lumens being the maximum light and brightness. And so that gives some flexibility for a homeowner to kind of mix and match about what kind of lighting they want to utilize to get to that 4,000 total. And I think 850 lumens is around a 60 watts, if comparison purposes, around a 60-watt light bulb. And then as you increase in density, the allowance gets higher. And then with multifamily, we actually use you're talking up to 20,000 lumens. And then we introduced this concept of per net acre, which means basically it's a definition in our proposed code that accounts for the developable area of a property. So if you have some open space, you know, or area that hasn't been developed, that wouldn't count against you, or you wouldn't get a chance to, I guess, take advantage of that. And so we have mixed use and non-residential has their own, each has their own unique requirements. And this is kind of taking kind of a best practices from other communities and kind of coming up with what we think is a reasonable amount of lighting to not overlight, but to get the job done. And then there's a provision in there that the public lighting adhere to standards contained in the current edition of the let's see, IES stands for Illuminating Engineering Society, I believe, recommended practices. And you know, we have it in the code that way. You know, when we have public lighting design going on, oftentimes we're working with a professional lighting professional who knows kind of what those standards mean and how to apply them. So that is maximum brightness. We did add a section on parking lot lighting. In that parking lot lighting shall be downcast, fully shielded, and meet the maximum brightness levels in accordance with again those IES standards. And again, this could be applicable to a you know, a shopping center or some type of commercial development. And at the time of development, we would have these kinds of we would confirm whether or not these standards were being met, and that's an opportunity for a lighting professional to be able to use this somewhat technical information and be able to assess it and let us know if it's in compliance. So color of light, as I mentioned, that's an important characteristic in trying to minimize the negative impacts of lighting. As you can see it down on the bottom, the warmer colors you get, the better for outdoor lighting. The brighter white, kind of blue colors, the better for indoor lighting. So we're trying to keep the indoor lighting light inside and the outdoor lighting outside. And so you can see the K, 2700 to 3000 K, the K stands for Kelvin. And so the code has a maximum Kelvin level of 3000 for all lighting. And you know, again, those are lumens and Kelvins. You know, they sound like technical information, but it's easily identifiable on most, I think, all lighting now. There were some changes, I don't know, 10 years ago that required that these kinds of that this kind of information be easily identifiable for the average person. So this information is kind of like your nutrition information on the side of a can. It tells you what you need to know. So that's helpful in making sure that the general public can choose the right light bulbs. There's a proposal for lighting curfew in the code that lighting be extinguished either by 11 p.m. And this is just applies to commercial. It does not apply to residential. Within 1 hour, either by 11 p.m. or within 1 hour of the close of normal business hours, or at the conclusion of usual operations, whichever occurs later. And then it may resume 1 hour before sunrise or opening of the business of the property, whichever is earlier. Based on feedback we heard from the business owners, we added a provision that if your business is open 24 hours a day, you're exempt from this provision. And then another element that we did hear from one of the business owners who owned a gas station was that they do reduce the amount of lighting when they're not open, but they do like to keep a certain amount of lighting available for security. They don't, in other words, they didn't want a completely dark property for safety, and so we added some guidelines relative to how that can be done. And then again, the color, as mentioned, limited to 3,000 kelvins. We had a lot of discussion about publicly owned lighting. As you guys can probably remember, there was an initial push for the public owned lighting to be exempt, given its need to be providing public safety for transportation, and we weren't sure if that was fully compatible with all the other requirements, but we think we're comfortable now that we can meet the requirements of being fully shielded, comply with the color temperature limits, and meet those brightness limits that I had mentioned too, that are unique to public lighting. The one area that hard to commit to completely is the light trespass requirement. And if you think of like the lighting, the Cascade Avenue lighting downtown, it's kind of at the back of the sidewalk. It's pretty close to the sidewalk and the property line for those business owners, and really difficult in some cases to not be able to see the bulb from the property line. John will tell me that it's not impossible if designed properly, but that's I guess a carve out that Public Works is comfortable with, but basically meeting a good portion of the other requirements. And John, you feel free to jump in at any time too if you have any thoughts on any of these things. Signage is another provision. We currently do have lighting regulations relative to signage, and in Sisters, unique and what I consider to be one of the great attributes of Sisters is that we don't have any internally lit signs. All of our signs are externally lit. So it certainly adds to the character of the community, and something that this sign or this lighting ordinance will continue. But it just gives some criteria about when lights should be extinguished. Also exempting 24-hour businesses, and then kind of limiting the sign area that can be illuminated to 200 square feet, which that's a pretty generous allowance. It's a 3x6 sign or somewhere in that range, or 4x6, 4x5. So it's a pretty good size sign. And that lighting must be downcast and fully shielded, just like all other lighting. And then there's a whole section on what lights are just prohibited outright. And these three here are basically carryovers from the existing ordinance. Really nothing new there. Just carrying forward things that people generally don't want to see in kind of lighting we don't want to see in our community. And then there's some exemptions. Those are things that don't need a lighting permit, or basically don't need to meet the other. I shouldn't say lighting permit because that's not a term we're using, but it does not require to meet the other requirements of the code. Non-conforming lighting, it's subject to its own set of standards in 215-2400, which we'll talk about. Airport operation lighting and aircraft navigational beacons required by federal or state law, those are exempt. Anything that's not required by federal or state law at an airport would have to conform to this ordinance. Which leads me to string lights. you know, this was something else, we probably had, I think, 3 or 4 items that, you know, we were having difficult coming to a resolution on, and string lights was one of them. We all noticed that, and maybe we have these on our own property. It's a great tool for creating ambience in your backyard, or commercial areas use it for their dining areas. It's kind of becoming a little bit part of the Central Oregon lifestyle, so to speak. But recognizing that you know, that these things are beginning to become much more popular, and maybe now is the time to provide some you know, some sideboards on what they can be used as. If you recall, we had this conversation about what impact these really have in the grand scheme of things. You know, total light pollution right now pretty small compared to street lighting and parking lot lighting, but to recognize the fact that these kinds of lights can be a nuisance to neighbors. It may not create a lot of light pollution itself, but bad lighting can create nuisances to neighboring property owners. We all have probably experienced that. So what the ordinance proposes, and this is kind of a sort of a compromise that kind of came out of direction from council and planning commission, was to not ban string lighting, but to put some standards around them. And so here's some standards that we're proposing. You can do them in either residential or non-residential zones. Should not be used to illuminate or decorate landscaping features. Shall not employ lamps that flash or flicker, and whose individual output does not exceed 50 lumens. So when used for purposes other than holiday lighting, they should not exceed the 3000 Kelvin. String lights are exempt from the downcast and fully shielding requirements of the code. It just kind of came down to really, even though they do make this product out on the market, it's difficult to get these things fully shielded and downcast. And then it also addresses what is sort of a kind of a burgeoning kind of use that I've noticed in town. I think of others have as well, where the lighting is kind of used to delineate. I guess I'm skipping through to G. Let me touch on F real quick. When it's used in a commercial zone, string lights can be installed in outdoor dining and entertainment areas only, and shall not be used to delineate or outline the edges of a building or for any other purpose. And interested to hear council's thoughts on this, because this is something that's probably new to you guys. You know, it's starting to become more of an issue. Some people think it, you know, it adds to the festiveness of the community, but you know, where you're adding these string lights to your eaves or to the outside of your building as a means to perhaps draw some attention to your business. And you know, as one puts one up, you see another one pop up, and just wanted to get the feedback from council on where you want to go with that. So wanted to draw attention to that provision. And then in residential zones, string lighting, the same thing, may not be used to delineate or outline the edges of patios, porches, decks, and similar structures that do not face directly toward a street or public right of way. And a curfew, which was an element that was mentioned by the council and the commission. And all to say that these lighting limitations do not apply to holiday lighting. They have their own. Basically, they do not have any standards as long as they're, you know, they have a time frame standard, but not any other standard. And then there's some provisions relative to decorative lighting. The holiday lighting period for lighting is November 1st to February 15th. You know, I'm sure we could hear comments on whether that time frame is too long or not. And then talking about some provisions for low lumen landscape lighting that you often see used. You can see some examples here. And then some exemptions, further exemptions that we're not required to adhere to the lighting ordinance. Special events where they do not exceed 5 days for a particular property in a calendar year. However, if a permanent installation for a special event venue was proposed, then that would be required to comply. Lighting for the US flag, temporary construction lighting, lighting under the jurisdiction of ODOT. There's been a lot of discussion about, Cascade Avenue and the highway running through town. We have some jurisdiction over the pedestrian lighting in the downtown area, but we don't have jurisdiction over lighting within the right of way of ODOT. So we can encourage them to do the right thing, and I think they're getting better at what they're doing, but ultimately they have the final say. And then some provisions related to athletic fields, primarily, making sure that that the lighting's turned off, that somebody doesn't take off and forget to turn the lights off, and that there's a reasonable curfew time frame there. Which brings us to non-conforming lighting. Our existing ordinance has this provision in place. We certainly thought that we needed to bring that forward again into the new ordinance. The discussion item has been really kind of what's the time frame that we should allow non-conforming lighting to become conforming. Initially, this was 10 years for publicly owned lights and 10 years for privately owned lights, and this part I guess I didn't change. The planning commission in their recommendation for approval recommended that we reduce the time frame of number 2 there down to 5 years for privately owned lighting. They just felt like the time frame of 10 years was too long enough for the community to forget about it, for staff to change, and potentially momentum lost there. So they have recommended 5 years for the privately owned lighting. And then there's some other provisions, some other opportunities where where we can encourage people or require to bring them into conformance, replacement or modification to non-conforming lighting. When lights are changed, should be put back with compliant lighting. And then when an application is brought forward for a conditional use or a site plan review, perhaps it's an addition to an existing building, that would be an opportunity for staff to say, hey, let's get all of our lighting up into conformance through this process. And then a provision that lighting plans are required in land use applications, with enough information that we can evaluate whether it meets the ordinance or not. Okay, that's a lot of information. I hope you took some good notes and imagine you have some questions. But in terms of next steps, if council is the final reviewing body on this ordinance, unless appealed to LUBA, but it would become effective 30 days after council approval.
Okay.
So questions?
I have a script to follow first, so hold off for 1 second. Number 6 on the script is correspondence. Have we received any correspondence on this matter other than those items included in the agenda?
Not any additional correspondence.
Okay. All right. At this time, I will ask each counselor whether they have questions for staff. Questions will be stated by each counselor. Staff will respond after all questions have been asked by counselors. When your name is called, please ask your questions or indicate that you have no questions. I'm going to go first. What we're voting on tonight, is it 5 years for privately or 10 years? I'm a little
It's
confused.
5 in the ordinance.
Yeah, the presentation, Councilor Ross is correct. The ordinance is correct. The PowerPoint presentation was the one that was incorrect. So 5 years for private, 5 years for public.
That was my only question. Counselor Cobb, do you want to go first?
Okay,
How many questions do you have?
not many. Hey, listen, I don't ask you that.
I'm asking you. Do you want to go last just in case someone else has a question that's the same as yours?
Hey,
I'm just asking.
hey. Okay. Just to have just a couple of questions, 3 to be
There you go.
clear.
That's perfect.
Okay, thank you. On the more recent slides, when you were talking about the illumination for string lights and, it, it seemed to me that the item D where it says, when not used for holidays, and then it goes on, talking about the lumens, that same kind of qualifier belongs with B and C. When not used for holidays, you can have, you can't have flashing or flickering. When not used for holidays, you can illuminate or decorate landscape features. So either don't have one lot used for holidays because we have a holiday code, or put it in, I don't know. So that's a suggestion. On the time frame for the holidays, 11/1 to 2/15, there are other holidays that sometimes people like to light their house: Halloween, Valentine's, 4th of July. Are those acceptable? You don't have to answer, just, I have one more question. On the security lighting, I would like to know what the guidelines are for security lighting, like for banks and the gas station, because if they're turning them down, they're not turning them down much. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Scott, do you want to handle those or?
Yeah, I'll maybe call on John to kind of help, here's a bad pun, illuminate, the, security lighting. Sorry, I had to throw one in.
Subject.
So in response to your question, Counselor Klopp, the security lighting standards we have in our code are not necessarily the ones that you see out in action out in the community already. Just wanted to clarify that. That would be some existing lighting that may or may not be in conformance with that security lighting. As far as the time frame for the holidays, yeah, if it's outside of that November 1st to February 15th, technically, it's not permitted. Are we going to go out there and crack down on every little thing? No. If we get a phone call from a neighbor, we'll let people know that provision exists in the code. So the answer to your question is technically not. So John, if you wouldn't mind kind of providing a little kind of overview of what security lighting might entail.
Sure, and I appreciate Councilor Cobb's question. It's a very good one. The IES guidelines that are referenced there in the ordinance draft about security lighting are a combination of pragmatism that's developed in the organization over decades, but also research where it's available that supports its conclusions. And the guidelines prescribe both what should be lit and what shouldn't be lit in order to enhance security, and to what light levels in order to improve visibility, especially to people who are off-site. So, for example, if you have law enforcement who drive a regular circuit or are on a beat and would be normally looking in on properties where there's some concern about theft, the idea is so that the lighting helps them see what's going on and doesn't inadvertently blind them, for one thing. So it's trying to work on the side of the people who are trying to do something about the security situation. So not going overboard, not providing light that, for example, could benefit a property thief by showing them, what there is to steal and making it very easy to do so. And I think most importantly, consistent with the research on this, it does not begin with the presumption that lighting deters crime. So the emphasis is not on using light as a tool to try to deter or prevent crime, but using light as a means to help law enforcement do their job, because we know that seems to be what works best when you're deploying light in order to ensure site security. So does that answer your question?
Yes, I have a follow-up on that. So would any homeowner or any business be able to say, I want to have security lighting?
I would maybe defer a little bit to Scott on that point. I would say that the code does not make a distinction, but where we imagine that the IES guidelines would come in is mainly in non-residential situations where you would need lighting permits. So if a business owner wanted to install additional lighting that they argued was necessary for security reasons and they needed permits to do it, that's where the obligation would kick in to follow the IES guidance.
I think that's correct.
Okay. Do you have any other questions? Okay,
I have a couple.
okay.
Related to security lighting, is there a color temperature requirement, Kelvin requirement in security lighting, or can it could be anywhere on the spectrum, including blue? I guess that's
There's
yeah. So,
Sure, that's another good question. The IES guidelines for security lighting are kind of agnostic on the point of color temperature. There have been concerns raised in the research community that high color rendition lighting can be used in a punitive way, depending upon the racial background of a potential criminal perpetrator. And they also don't seem to find a lot of evidence that it's determining in the sense of whether the security lighting is effective. So to my recollection, and I would have to go back and double check, but the last time I looked at it, there was no particular discussion in the guidelines about color temperature as a matter of security. There's a discussion about color rendition. And I think that's more for the benefit of law enforcement in a situation where, for example, kind of like the same way you would be worried about somebody showing up at an emergency room and they've got some liquid on their clothing. And if the lighting color rendition is not very good, you won't know whether it's water or whether it's blood or whether it's motor oil or some other substance. So it's a little more pragmatic in that sense. And they don't talk about specific recommendations for color temperature. So on that basis, it's my opinion that the typical user in this case would be able to adhere to the color temperature requirement in the text amendment and be consistent with the IES guidance.
that was really my question. Having seen canopy lighting on gasoline stations in Sedona, which is an IES community, and knowing that their color temperature is significantly different than many of the canopies here in town, I was questioning that. And then the second is to Scott. The MFR has a 2,000 K per acre or per net acre or acre designation. How is that arrived at? Is that based upon the 850 concept of exterior lighting, how much exterior lighting it would have? Where does that number come from? I'm curious.
John, would you be willing to kind of address that
Yeah.
question?
Can you remind me the specific?
In going through the different types of lighting that's allowed in areas, on a multiple family residential, there was a standard for each exterior fixture, but it says could not exceed 20,000, up to 20,000 lumens per acre. And I'm wondering how that's arrived at. Is that just an arbitrary number? Is it based upon a density pack?
I see. It's a bit arbitrary. There's not a really good prescription for this. For example, in the IES guidelines, it's a little bit ad hoc and it depends on the experience that we've had in other communities. And we look at things like the overall density in the community. We look at the number of high density housing units like this, and you kind of go by feel. 20,000-ish is a number that I've seen in a number of other communities for multifamily residential. I don't think that anybody's going to have any particular problem or concern about meeting that number if that's the question.
I think the question was, is that high? It felt a little high to me. And so I'm guessing that, Scott, when we implement these things in code and we're looking at a site plan and a development plan, that number is sort of the do not exceed, but not necessarily the allowed. Is that correct?
It's a do not exceed.
Thank you.
That's it. Okay. Councilor Betts?
And just following up on that last question, I'm assuming that, you know, in these situations of lumens, are we going to be, this is a little bit out of the code, but, you know, does our code compliance officer need to have a light meter, basically. How are we going to measure this and regulate this?
Yeah, I think there's going to need to be some investment in some tools that are often commonly used, I believe, out there. But John, you want to address what you see as kind of the useful tools to measure lighting for a code enforcement officer?
Yes, in this case, you're not looking at anything particularly expensive. The kind of low cost light meters that you can get from a lot of retailers that are used in industrial applications or photography or that kind of thing would be perfectly fine to make the measurements where we specify quantities that can be measured in the field. And I should make a distinction there between the kinds of numerical quantities that we've put into the text amendment where you can make a field measurement versus where you cannot. So if we're talking about a light trespass threshold in foot candles, for example, an inexpensive light meter can do that just fine. It does require a little bit of finesse or training on the part of the user to make sure that the measurement is made correctly. But it's not something where you have to go spend a lot of money to get a very specialized piece of equipment to make an accurate measurement. On the other hand, there are other quantities like lumens, and this is a question that I get a lot. How do you measure lumens in the field? And the short answer to that is that you can't. That's not a field measurable quantity. That's something that's measured by a manufacturer in a laboratory setting. And so if there are questions that arise after the fact, you would have to go back to the manufacturer information to find the number of lumens from their lab measurements. But that's a fairly rare occurrence that there's an after the fact issue with enforcement on that. Almost all of that for lumens is done at the plan review stage. And it's the kind of thing where you would read a number off of a manufacturer data sheet and total it up for the site. That would tell you whether it passed muster or not.
Okay, that's helpful. And then my other questions are about string lights again, and the exemptions, and they have to do with 3AF and 3AG. No, 3F, 3G. First of all, just the string lights it said something about being needed to be turned off, or have to conform to the normal business hours. And I know that there was other lighting, commercial lighting that was said that it could stay on for an hour afterwards. Obviously people are still there cleaning up or what have you. So I just thought that didn't really match that code. It's not a deal breaker, but it seems like something that might be helpful that those two criteria matched, especially if the string lighting is being used in like an outdoor eating situation, and then you need to clean that area up before you close for the night. And the second is the next one, 3G, the string lights not on the street side or facing right of way, in a residential area. And I'm a little confused by that, where that came from, because I'm kind of thinking of just some houses off the top of my head that I just know of in the community that have string lights, but they're thinking of one in particular. The house is their only patio, deck space, whatever is in the front of the house, and it's on a corner. And so that is literally the only place that they have an outdoor space. So, it's obvious that that's why they've chosen to use them there. So there is no other place for them to congregate outside. That's a small house, for instance. So I'm just kind of curious of the background of that, because I'm not 100% comfortable with that. Good point.
Yeah, I think it kind of just came about, kind of later in the process, similar to, this provision about commercial businesses delineating their kind of the outside of their structures. It's just I totally hear the example that you laid out. I'm sure there's other examples like that that would be a hardship to them to meet that and not have the ability to use them. I think it's just a general way to kind of put some sideboards on the use of string lights. Is it a deal killer? Was it somebody felt really passionate about that and put that in there? I don't think that was the case. So I think it was more just kind of an effort to, the feedback that we got, I think, from Council and Planning Commission was, yeah, let's allow them. Not everybody, was in favor of them, but the consensus was allow them, but put some sideboards on it. If those are sideboards that the council's uncomfortable with, we can certainly remove them.
Yeah, I just feel like I've heard, just in general lighting, I've heard, I think, more complaints from people of lighting in behind a house, because that's usually where people's bedrooms are. And so it's like their neighbor's light shining into their bedroom in the back of the house, in our patio in the back. So I seem to
Yeah.
hear more complaints about that than actually lighting in the front of a structure, so, or a residence at least. So I kind of have I'm not really comfortable with that one, especially if, all lights still just need to be out by a certain hour anyway, so. That's
Yeah.
it for me.
Could I tag on to that one?
Sure.
I just, I think this is a really good point by Counselor Letts, and maybe council would consider just, when we get to the point of whether or not we're approving this, that maybe we remove that one G, 3G. Because I agree, it's not really a necessary.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll definitely get to that point.
Okay.
And please bring it up when we get to the appropriate.
I'm sorry.
Are we not reducing the output of the lights that are allowed on the string lights to the point where they would not be an issue into somebody's bedroom next door kind of thing? They're not allowed to be flashing, they're.
Yeah, let's bring it up during deliberations for sure, okay? Because it sounds like it can be something.
I have a clarification question,
Sure.
but go ahead.
Well, we actually have a section for that.
Okay, then I'll wait till we get there.
Yeah.
Happily.
That's number 9. We're at number 7. If everybody's done with questions of staff, then we're going to move on to public testimony and get the public involved, because we're still in the public portion of this meeting. We will now invite members of the audience to provide testimony. When called, please come forward and state your name and address for the record before proceeding with your testimony. When your name and number is called, please indicate whether you or not we will be providing testimony. For those attending via Zoom, we will conduct a roll call who wants to provide testimony. We will begin with proponents of the proposal. That means support, just in case anybody wasn't clear. Do we have anybody?
Paul Bennett?
There we go.
Hi, my name is Paul Bennett. I live at 159 North Rope Street, just down the street here by the elementary school. First of all, I wanted you to make sure you saw my sweatshirt.
I did.
Well, it's,
I can determine maybe where you're gonna go with this.
Yeah.
it's like dark skies camouflage, like I can't even see it. It's so dark.
This was part of the merch, that's part of the Dark Skies Association. They did a worldwide Zoom, 24-hour Zoom conference about 2 months ago. And it went around to 45 different countries, talking, giving people a chance to talk about what their country is doing about night skies, because it's a worldwide problem, of course. And in particular, how it affects our wildlife and flights of birds. And if you think about, for eons, animals have depended on the moon and the stars to navigate. And then suddenly there are all these other lights like Las Vegas. It's like, what is a bird supposed to think of that, And why do moths gather around our outdoor lights in the front yard? And it confuses them and kills them. So it's a big concern for our wildlife. That's one thing I wanted to just address as this conference. The other thing was I wanted to bring up, well, one other thing too, is what about a business? Like we have a business right next door to our house. And does it have a different lighting ordinance than ours? I mean, the business is in a neighborhood. Should it comply to be considered a residential home, or should it be considered a business and thus have a different kind of security lighting? And anyway, I've tried to talk with our neighbors about this, and they feel I'm harassing them, So it's like the safest thing a neighbor can have, I think, in any neighborhood is a good relationship with their neighbor. We view each other's homes much more than we see our own homes. I look out my window at our neighbor's house 50 times a day because that's right there. I see what goes on in their house and around me. And so I think that really has to be emphasized, that you need to get along well with your neighbors. That's your best safety feature. And if that means changing your light bulb, gee, I mean, how big a deal can that be? Turning your lights off, you know, a rather small thing. I've been talking about this with the city council and the planning commission for, I think, close to 3 years now. And one of the things that Emma was talking about earlier was this idea of communication. And I felt very frustrated with that because I'm never sure if I'm being heard or not, because we're not in a dialogue here. You give me 3 minutes to talk. I don't know if you're hearing me. Why don't you give me a chance within that 3 minutes to ask a question, or for you to ask me a question? You give me 3 minutes. Can't that be worked into that 3 minutes? At the end of 3 minutes, you go, that's all the time for. I'm sorry, you know, it's how we gave you 3 minutes. And if you want to talk more, you know, meet with one of us. I have written notes to Susan and to Gary, and they responded right away. And I much appreciate that. And I much appreciate all the effort that you're putting into on this particular, you know, dark sky issue, because it is very important. But there has to be a dialogue for people to feel comfortable even coming here to talk about this. How are we supposed, I've sent out a survey to all of you on both the planning commission and the city council about what you could send out to the larger community about lighting issues that would bring in a ton of information. I did not hear one thing back. I would think it would be so simple for someone just to send a thank you note, and we will go over this at a later date. Sometimes the hardest thing is just, when should things be brought up? What part, you know, just like talking about what kind of lighting fixtures should the city, you know, should we have on Cascade? I can come up with 100 ideas, and I've come up with a lot here, but I'm just talking into the wind. I feel like I don't know where any of this is going. And so when people read about this in the paper, they go, dark skies, it's going to cost $100,000 to replace those lights. Really? Is it? I mean, have we looked at all? But we're not going to do these dark sky things because that's costing us so much money. The city should use that money in other ways. So it's confusing to people when they read things like this that are, you know, in our paper, as opposed to, really, is it going to cost that much? Have we really discussed this as to what are all the possibilities? There's just so many possibilities. But I think this idea of dialogue really has to be built in here somewhere. And my suggestion, if you're giving us each 3 minutes to talk, give us a chance to ask a question. Sometimes it's just a very simple question, and give us a chance, give you a chance to ask us a question, or to say, you know, we can't do that at this time, or that's just simply not legal, you know, just to make a statement like that. But I think that would go a long way to helping people and bringing people here, because then they feel like you're being heard. Any questions?
Thank you for your comments.
Okay.
Now, I'll say something in a bit, but I have to stick with what we have, okay? It's now time for opponents. Oh, is there?
Yeah, Rima, give it.
Sorry about that. I saw you bring it up, but I didn't know for sure if you were for it, against it, or.
Sorry, I didn't realize we needed the paper. Rima Gibbet, 18557 McSwain Drive, Sisters. Thank you so much for the work you've done on this. I know Scott's put a ton of time, the Planning Commission and the City Council. It's been a couple years, and I guess I just wanted 2 things. I wanted to say I support the revisions. I support having the 5-year time frame to bring it into conformance. I think that's reasonable. And I also, thinking about the string lights, I feel like what's been stated is a medium ground, whether or not they're in the front or the back. I don't really think that matters as far as to the code, but what does matter is turning them off because they do, wherever you're looking at them, you know, if you're driving by or if it's in your, you know, your bedroom from the back of somebody else's house to the back of your house, they do shine in and create light at night. And so having the curfew makes sense. And I also wanted to recognize both two former Sisters High School students, Paola and Lizzie, who are here tonight, who have really been sticking through with this since the very beginning and have helped kind of initiate the awareness around it. And so just thank you for hearing and working on this. I think it's going to really be beneficial for our community.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Is there any more proponents?
Go to the Zoom.
Okay.
At this point. So if anybody on Zoom would like to speak at the public testimony, please raise your hand and I'll unmute you. See none?
Okay. We will now hear from opponents of the proposal. Are there any of those people here that want to speak against the proposal? None written. Do you want to do Zoom on that too?
If there's any opponents that would like to speak at the public testimony, please raise your hand. Unmute you.
Okay, thank you. We will now hear from those with neutral testimony. None written in the room, I assume. We'll try Zoom on that.
If anybody has neutral testimony, please raise your hand and I'll unmute you.
All right, last chance for anybody in the room. Okay. That's all the public testimony. It's back to us for questions of clarification. Is there anything that's come up during the public testimony that you'd like to ask Scott about, or John, the consultant? Is there anything else?
I have
A question? Go ahead.
two. Scott, if a business is in a residence, a home constructed as a residential facility, not as a business, but as a residence, it would, in my mind, have to comply with the residential requirements, whether there's a business in there or not. Is that a fair assumption on my part?
It's based on zoning, right, Scott?
The lighting requirements?
Yes.
Well, it's based on use.
But if the residence is occupied, but also has a business in it, and I know we have a number of those here in this town.
Oh, like a home occupation, you mean?
Yes.
Yes.
Got it. Yeah, that would be subject to the residential requirements.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question, when we talked earlier about lighting, you mentioned that we don't have any internally lit lighting in the town, which is great. But I'm wondering, where does neon fit into that? So I have a large neon sign, not the ones in the window that say open, but you know, if somebody wanted to advertise their business with neon, is that allowed?
That's what I'd have to get some clarification from somebody, maybe has a little more technical knowledge than myself. Have you come across that, John? Or how would you, as our consultant, how would you look at that if somebody proposed something vis-a-vis our proposed ordinance?
Sure. I can tell you that more often than not, I see in municipal codes that they exempt neon lighting from regulation, largely because there's not a whole lot of it out there relative to other kinds of illuminated signage. There's not a lot that you can do in the sense of the dark sky friendly aspect. You can't really shield it because the tubes have to be visible for the lighting to have any effect. They're generally not very intense sources. We don't worry about them as sources of glare or anything of that nature. And just my bottom line opinion about it is I don't think that they're a big problem from a dark sky perspective, but we'd have to go back and look at precisely what your sign code says about it right now. And I don't recall off the top of my head if it mentions neon.
Which brings me to my next question. A large business sign illuminated by 40, 50, 60 light bulbs, which I've seen not only in this town, but in other towns.
You mean like the letters?
The letters are illuminated,
Right.
spelling something out
Yeah,
or
that was
something
gonna be
like
my
that.
question.
Is that allowed underneath the sign code, and would that be allowed underneath the dark sky code? They're not downcast, they're not shielded, they all face the street.
Good question. I'd have to take a look at the sign code. I can't really answer that on the fly, unfortunately.
Hey, Scott, when's the last time we looked at the actual signage code?
Good question. Been a long time. It's something we just had a discussion last week, saying that it's in dire need of updating due to some Supreme Court decisions and changes in the way we can regulate signage. So
My question really comes about from the language in the ordinance, which talks about downcast lighting. Signage lighting must be downcast. It can only be upcast if it's illuminating, say, a flagpole or whatever. We don't address lighting that essentially is outward facing, that is illumination, has no shielding. It's just a whole bunch of light bulbs in a row spelling out a bunch of words. That's a business sign. And it seems to me that the language in the ordinance doesn't address that.
probably does not. It's probably something that's probably more appropriate in the sign code, but I'd have to. I'm pulling up. If you want to go on to something else, I can kind of look through the sign code real quick and see if I can find that answer while we're still in the meeting.
Critical to the decision here, but I think it's a glaring omission.
Oh, good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Scott, if you wouldn't mind just kind of taking a quick look at that. Obviously, I think that there's, further work to be done beyond just dark skies and just signage in general.
Right.
And I think we can all acknowledge that at some
Yeah,
point.
there are always going to be things that come up that don't quite fit.
Well, but we're not going anywhere, so.
Yeah.
All right.
done.
Any more questions of Scott or our consultant? John, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Scott, thank you for your stuff. I'm going to close this public portion of the hearing, and we're going to move on to city council deliberations. This is the time when, if there's anything you want to wordsmith, this is the place to discuss it. And if a majority of us want to change that, then we can deliberate about that. While we're going into deliberations, the thing that I'd like to remind everybody, and then includes us, is the part that really pleases me and I think is very important. And it's this dark skies amendment, but it's all of our code enforcement. And that is, we try and do this with education before enforcement. We're not here to blast people, 30 days down the road and say, I'm ripping your lights down or anything like that. So there's 5 years to get this thing right. And I think that, we're going to use that as our main tool, because I think that's the right way to do it. We're not here to go neighbor against neighbor on our lights. Now, so we've closed the hearing and must deliberate towards a decision. Our options are to recommend approval as proposed, approval with changes, or denial. When your name is called, please provide your thoughts on the proposed amendments and what decision you're inclined to make. But again, obviously, this is where we can have a discussion up here. To a previous speaker's thoughts, I did want to address that and say, I understand what you're saying, but we've been talking about this for 3 years and we're just at a couple of little final details. And the one thing that Emmy did in her presentation is to remind everybody that obviously we're here to listen, and we've spoken before, maybe not as often as you want. I apologize for that. I get a little busy sometimes and my emails get neglected. I fully admit that. But the planning commission is also there to listen. Staff is also here to listen. And I'd like to encourage anybody that has issues with some of these details to try and get them in earlier than the night we're making a decision, because obviously this is 3 years down the road from we started this discussion. And actually it's been a lot longer than that, because I know some of our 40 former city councilors were talking about this 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. So I hope that helps a little, and I'd love to talk to you at any other time and just have some discussion. I'm readily available for that. And I think all of our counselors are. I want to start with you, Council President Blum. And do you want to talk about that possible little text change? And Susan, I'd like to get, you kind of brought that up as well. Why don't you guys talk about that?
Okay, well, I think there's 3 or 4 things I think we've kind of brought up that, Scott also brought up that he wanted us to, determine whether or not we wanted outdoor lighting to be able to outline a commercial building. So that was one of the things I wrote down that he asked us
Okay.
to, that's something in there that he wanted to get our perspective on that. I am, I love the holiday lighting, but I think what makes it special is it's holiday lighting. So I would lean towards no, I wouldn't like to see the outdoor lighting, string lighting around buildings on a regular basis. During the holidays, I think it's special, and I think that that's adequate. I wouldn't particularly do that. Around the residential, the string lighting, I agree that as long as it's turned off at a reasonable time at night, I'm not sure it makes a big difference whether it's on the front or on the side or, around the, I'm not even sure I care about that it's around bushes. It said shouldn't highlight shrubs. I think that they're kind of talking about that downward lighting that goes up towards shrubs. Yeah, I get that. So I don't think that we need to specifically say we don't want it on the roadside. Because I think that just all depends on the layout of the property, rather your deck or wherever you would want to utilize that lighting would fall. So I don't have any problem with taking that particular lighting out. I think this is a fabulous ordinance. I'm psyched. It's been a long time coming. Yahoo, we've worked so hard, and our partners have worked so hard. The community and the schools and the students have worked so hard to make this bubble up to the top of our list. And we've put it to the side because it wasn't really an emergency compared to some of the other things, but now it's finally here. I'm overjoyed. I think this has been a fabulous process, and we've gotten all kinds of input, and I don't think it's perfect. It's not going to apply to every single case that's going to come up, but we're used to that and dealing with exceptions, and then we deal with them as they come. And by having the goals and the reasoning up front of why we're doing this, then we can make changes and decisions based on the why we're doing this. And it shouldn't be a big deal to do this. My concern now is how to implement it in a way that the community feels like, well, we're doing the right thing. And I think council has to look at options that we can consider about possibly helping with funding if it gets to the point where there are some situations where the funding becomes a major detriment to it being implemented or major hardship for residences or businesses. And so that's something that we can talk about in our goals when it comes up. And I think.
What's your four things? Can you bullet point those? Because
Oh, well,
I feel like I got 3 of them.
Okay, maybe that one.
Outlining commercial buildings, strings at 11, string lights turn off at 11 p.m. and that little part about facing the road or something.
Was there something else that?
I'm just making sure. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure you had your piece.
Yes,
Okay,
I think I have.
go ahead.
I'll defer to Jennifer because she was the one that brought up that 3G.
The road thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think on exemptions 3G, if you want specific language, I think we can remove all of that except for the last sentence, which just says string lighting must be completely extinguished by 11 p.m.
So
And
can
we
you-
could say
can you
in
read-
residential zones, string
Yeah.
lighting must be.
Go ahead and just read it out loud that you think that can be struck.
And I would remove string lighting may be used to delineate or outline the edges of patios, porches, decks, and similar structures that do not face directly toward a street or public right of
So
way.
it's so there's two sentences in G and you just want to remove the first sentence.
It would read.
Residential.
I think as I hear it, it would read, in residential zones,
Yep.
string lighting must be completely extinguished by 11 PM.
Okay.
That's what I think they're
Yeah.
trying to say.
So you're
Okay.
taking off all the sideboards, just not the one that,
Yeah, I don't know how much in the weeds literally we need to
Well, I
get on
just want to
that
make
one.
I just want to make it simple so we don't.
we've already talked about how bright they can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we
They
have
gotta
light
be off
we
at
have
11.
light trespass language.
Yeah.
So is there a reason? But, you know, it was probably the planning commission that said, well, we need to have some sideboards on there. Make sure that everything that's in there is taking out.
I think maybe it was so specific because it was trying to differentiate itself from like holiday string lighting, maybe. Cause it's saying you can use, you know.
Putting strings around trees.
Okay,
So
I'm trying to.
Don't know
think
how
of-
important that is, but
Yeah.
I mean, if we leave it, I'm just asking, if we leave it, is it the end of the world?
Yeah, we don't like it. I like what Gary said.
Or-
I don't think we have to be that specific.
or
I
at the
really
bare
don't.
minimum, just remove the part that says that do not face directly toward a street or public right of way. We could just take out the last part of the sentence.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Yeah, you could stop at similar structures. You could say in residential zones, string lighting may be used to delineate or outline the edges of patios, porches, that's the front of a house, decks and similar structures. Period.
And then add
And remove the not facing the street.
and then just add that last part of it, string lighting and the timing.
I just want to make.
Yeah, I think so,
Scott, can you pull
because,
that up on the shared screen if you?
because I don't want
can
to
see it.
see string lighting around trees and around buildings
Yeah,
and.
no, that makes sense. That makes sense.
So around decks and around,
Where they're eating.
And the similar structures. I
So,
think that's
so we're
pretty
just taking
clear.
out, do not.
that it
do
can't be
not
along the
face
front,
Directly toward a street or public right.
right?
Yep.
That's what I was proposing.
Okay.
Okay, I'm with
So,
you.
are you good with that?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
So we're gonna remove, I just want to make sure I say it out loud. That do not face directly towards a street or public right of way.
That's correct.
Because that's similar structures, you could put the period in there and strike
the
the rest
period
of
right
it.
there. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. And
Are
then-
are we clear on that, Scott?
It's mud.
He's asleep.
Yes, no, I'm with you.
Okay. Want to make sure you
Do
understand.
you want to strike through that or are we okay with not doing that? Is it?
We can't do it in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just making sure. Okay, but you have, you got it.
I do not have it.
Okay.
Scott has it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Scott has it, sorry.
Yeah.
You got it, Scott?
I got it.
So,
Okay.
all right, so that's
one.
one. Outline the commercial building holiday only.
Yep.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
where is that in here? In our text, Scott, about outlining a commercial building?
That's F.
Okay,
And
Yep.
so that we're saying, it's going to be for the holidays only.
We're talking 3F relates to using lights to delineate the outline the edges of a building.
In other words, we're getting rid of F.
no,
No.
no.
We're not,
I think it said shall not be used to delineate or outline the edges of a building except during the holiday.
Well, it actually
well,
does,
I think that's already in there. This is.
Is it?
no.
Not in that section.
It's in H. H says,
That's
go to H,
residential.
aforementioned does not apply to holiday lighting. So in
Yeah.
non-residential zones, you can't outline your building.
Oh,
Right.
okay, so we're all in
We're
agreement.
all in
That's
agreement, yeah.
not changing anything.
That change
We were
it.
just getting rid of F.
Okay, on that,
What?
No.
clarification,
No.
clarification on,
It says
on,
May be installed,
excuse me.
may not be installed. So if we get rid of F, then the aforementioned limitations do not apply to holidays. So there's no permission. The permission to do it is in F. So if we get rid of F, we do not have.
But F takes away the ability for an organization to have their outdoor dining area and entertainment areas lit.
And we're okay with that.
So you have to
Okay.
leave F.
Okay, I'm just looking
Yeah.
at the first sentence, I guess. The non-resident string lights may be installed.
Go ahead.
Entertainment area only.
I'll wait
shall
till
not
we're
be
done.
used To delineate or outdoor edges. Shall not be. Dining areas only and shall not be used to, okay, it says, no, they can't use it.
Yeah,
Right.
so
Oh, okay, I thought it said, he was saying that they had allowed it, and I was saying,
No.
no, I don't want to allow it. So F is.
it says shall
certainly-
not be used in
Shall
the
not.
building, and then H says except during the holidays, that doesn't apply.
Okay,
So
so
I think
we like the language as is.
Yeah.
Unless,
No,
I was thinking it was giving it
I know, your
permission.
brain rolls on this.
Oh,
so this gets back to my clarification that I asked earlier about D in this same section.
I'd like to comment on that.
okay.
when you're
Yeah,
ready.
well, what?
Scott,
okay.
can you pull up, is it 3D?
Yeah, 3B, C, and D.
Okay,
Okay, those, there is a clarification in C on holidays. So why is that there? I mean, excuse me, on D, on holidays. You know, if we've got the clarification in the final letter, which is F, right?
H. It was
H,
for
H, yeah, for holidays, then we don't need that clarification in D, which I thought was needed in B and C. So if we take out that clarification in D about other than holidays, all the statement down in H says everything above is, you know, has nothing to do with holidays.
so it's restating.
Yeah, it's a duplication. So it's just a, you know, a Scribner's really.
Doesn't hurt to have it in there.
Well, you know, it makes one question, well, what about
Well,
these
yeah.
above, you know? It's kind of confusing, I think, and redundant.
So you're recommending that it should say string lights, D should state, string lights shall consist only of white light sources with a CCT not to exceed 3000 Kelvin.
Right,
Is that what
and,
you're suggesting?
right, because then the bottom one says except for holidays. Yeah. Yes, that is, thank you.
I think that,
Scott, are we in the
Okay.
wood? Does that
What's
make?
that?
so
Say
on,
again?
Take it-
I'm following that. That makes sense.
yeah,
Okay,
Good, yay,
okay.
all right.
I'm good.
Nothing else?
So that's two changes then, right? D and F.
G, 3G.
D and G.
D and G, 3D. So
and
we
the other
have,
one didn't need to be changed
Yeah.
because we
D-
Yeah.
like
3D
it the
and
way it
3G.
was.
can you go back to G just so I can, so I'm clear? Thank you, Scott. Just roll up there.
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
one we're taking.
All right.
Yep.
So those are our two
Put a
changes.
period in
Everybody else is good
instructors.
with everything
Yeah.
else?
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
Right.
so that would be approval with changes, B.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So, do we move on then, Carrie? Motion for decision? We don't have to restate those changes, right, Scott? You got those?
We can just say as we have previously approved.
Yeah, so just to make sure I understand, it's a change to 3D to remove the reference to the holiday lighting, and then 3G taking out the part that says that do not face directly toward a street or public right of way.
Correct.
So
Okay,
just those two changes?
so we can probably get a motion to read by title only and then vote for those, what we want at the end.
I move to have the city manager read ordinance 533 by title only.
Or-
Second.
Or his
Do we have a second?
Or it's designated.
second.
We're assistant city manager.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I missed who seconded that.
I,
Andrea?
yep.
Sure.
So we're gonna roll call vote this to read by title only. Mayor Preen is aye. Council President Blum,
I,
Councilor Letts,
Aye.
Councilor Cobb,
Aye.
Councilor Ross.
Hi.
All right. So now, the Assistant City Manager Prosser reads ordinance 536 by title.
Ordinance 536, an ordinance of City of Sisters amending Sisters Development Code, chapters 2.15, special provisions, section 2.15.2400, dark skies standards.
All right, and now we will, I will ask a motion to approve and adopt ordinance 536. We're using option 2.
Mr. Mayor, I move to recommend to City Council approval of ordinance 536, City File TA 22-03, subject to the proposed changes as indicated in the record.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any final deliberations? This is really awesome, everybody. All right, I want to call for a vote. Mayor Preeden is aye. Council President Blum.
Aye.
Councilor Letts.
Aye.
Councilor Cobb.
Aye.
Councilor Ross.
Yep.
Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time spent on this.
Thanks, Scott. That's a lot of hard work. We know. All right.
And big thanks to the high school astronomy club.
Yep.
Yes.
Big.
Correct.
Good job, everybody.
I still use your presentation from a couple years ago as like as a bar of how I judge other people's presentations that come in here because it was so good. It was very.
I want to see what you do now at your current age. I'm
Yeah.
like, do better. Yeah, that was real good.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Once again, that's community right there. All right, item B of council business, West Side Pump Station Agreement. Jackson, sir.
Thanks for hanging in there.
Yeah, right. Thanks for everybody hanging in there.
Jackson Dumanch, Public Works Project Coordinator, seeking discussion and consideration of a motion to approve a professional services agreement with HHPR for the design of the West Side Pump Station project in an amount not to exceed $232,375 and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement subject to minor legal revisions. This was a high priority project that came about through the development of the 2023 wastewater master plan. Excuse me. Would essentially collect wastewater from the west side of the city, divert that through a 8-inch, 4,500 foot pressure main, intercepting into the 12-inch pressure main at Jefferson and Locust, and proceed on to the wastewater treatment plant. Individuals that would be working on the project have extensive experience in designing these pump stations, especially in Central Oregon. So we were excited to see that. And we expect to see cost estimates periodically throughout the design process. And I'd be happy to answer any questions to the
Okay,
best of my ability.
awesome. Any questions? Can you explain exactly where the route is going from? Do you have a map or?
It's
Or
in your packet.
I know, but I don't have my packet in front of me.
So where US 20 goes diagonally through the roundabout, anything west of that
Okay,
funnels into that in addition to Best Western.
okay. All right,
So almost half the town.
just half the town.
And I was looking at, the design cost looked a little high to me, but then I realized at the end you made a statement that a significant part of this was, I scrolled and lost the page.
My fault.
No. A significant part of the design includes a full topographical survey to analyze and design the most cost-effective and flow effluent alignment. So there is a significant amount of money in this $200,000 related to the planning before even any design of a structure gets done. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had the same concern, and also it seemed like there's drilling involved as well, so that seemed like,
Yeah.
okay, that's not cheap. Because
Yeah.
I was kind of taken aback by
I
that cost
was
too. I was
too
like,
initially until I read more carefully the
Yeah.
material. Yeah,
All right, any other questions?
I'm glad I wasn't the only one.
Does anybody want to have any discussion about it? Does anybody want to provide a motion?
Okay. I move a professional service agreement I move to approve a professional service agreement with Harper, Hauff, Peterson and Rigolis, Inc. For the design of the West Side Pump Station project in an amount not to exceed $232,375 and authorize the Assistant City Manager?
No, the city manager.
City manager to execute the agreement subject to minor legal revisions.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any final discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any dissension? No? There you go.
Thank
Good, good job.
Apparently poop doesn't always go downhill.
You have to survey the situation.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do.
Make sure it does.
In the event that the city manager can't execute the contract, our assistant city manager would be able to if he was not available. All right. True or not true?
I thought
True.
the proposal smelled.
That's what she's there for. All right. Item C, this was added to the agenda today, and I know there's people in the audience that are very interested in this and maybe a few on Zoom as well. It's resolution 2024-01, emergency declaration. Assistant City Manager Prosser, would you like to help us out with this?
Yeah, so thank you for allowing us to put this resolution onto the agenda tonight. These resolutions usually come with specific places that the temporary shelters would be in place at. We had a discussion among staff and Mayor Preden and Council President Blum about the imminent very cold weather that has shown up already, but is continuing to be here for the next potentially couple of weeks. And so what we've done is actually pared this resolution down to not state a specific place, but really allow for the calling of a cold weather emergency declaration across the town, which would allow entities that had facilities to be able to stand up emergency shelters as long as they were in compliance with fire code and any other stipulations from the resolution. So within this resolution, we did put in a couple of what I would call maybe a little more stringent weather related items. And so I'm just going to read that so that people are very clear on what this piece looks like. So temporary nighttime cold weather shelter facilities may be necessary for local residents when a winter storm warning is issued for 97759 by the National Weather Service and or temperature is at 25 Fahrenheit or lower and or 5 inches or more of snow is forecasted in a 12-hour period or 7 inches within a 24-hour period, and or a life-threatening combination of snow and or ice accumulation with wind or any time deemed necessary by the city manager. So those stipulations, the snow and those pieces really come out of the National Weather Service guidelines for our area. But we thought we wanted to spell them out a little more clearly within the resolution.
And can I ask for a clarification? The 25 degrees Fahrenheit, is that as a high temperature or just any time during the day or night?
During the nighttime.
Okay.
And I can clarify that.
Okay.
Because this is for nighttime shelters as well. So I know you guys have had a chance, I sent this over in the middle of the afternoon. If you've had a chance to look through it, and I'm happy to answer questions for you and anything else that you might have.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? No? This is not too dissimilar from what we've done in the past. We, at that time, it was mostly the churches that were involved, but we wanted to give opportunity for other locations in an emergency fashion. So that's the way, that's the reason it's kind of written the way it's written. Everything else is there. And I think that this is a good thing that we're doing. So
I'm sorry, I did not point out one point, is that this declaration is from January 10th till January 25th. So it is a 2-week time frame where we're seeing this kind of heavy winter weather. And then if needed, these declarations can be reissued or re-upped. And we put it on the 25th because we do have a council meeting on the 24th if we need to do another resolution. Thank you.
The staff report does say 24th, but the resolution says 25th.
Okay, thank you.
So any questions or clarifications that need to be done? Okay. Love to hear a motion possibly.
I move to approve resolution 2024-01.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any dissension? No? There you go. Thank you. We have something in place.
Da-da-da-da.
Okay, what's next? Other business, staff comments?
Brain fog.
All right. Joe, why don't you just come on up?
All right, thank you. Happy New Year. And first thing I'd like to do is thank you on behalf of staff, most importantly, the Public Works staff on the approval of the on-call rate from 10% to 25% of wages during the consent agenda. Especially we're working with just 4 Public Works employees right now, especially with the amount of work that they have going on at night. So they don't have a very big kind of cycle in one every 4 weeks, of course. So that goes a long way with them. So much appreciated. Thank you for doing that.
So they're on call a week at a time?
Typically, yeah, it is. Yep. They just kind of rotate and they're flexible, of course, with, exceptions for traveling or what have you.
Do they do Monday through Sunday? I'm just wondering.
It is Sunday through Saturday, I
Okay,
believe.
so you split.
Yeah. Right,
split
Jackson,
people's
is it?
Weekends. Ooh.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
I'm thinking of payroll instead.
Yeah,
I
gotcha.
apologize. Okay, so with the new year, we have the campground reservations. I was looking forward to sharing some of that information with you all. Those went live on the 2nd, went really well. We had, as we always do, a lot of the event weekends booked up. Last year we had $65,000 of reservations for that first day. This year was almost 73,000. And when Julie and I kind of looked into that data, that was interesting. A lot of people had reserved actually more days on average than they had last year. So instead of 3 days, it was 5 days. And then a lot of other weekends were filling up. Even we were fielding calls at 9:30, 10 o'clock for people looking at like Memorial Day. Well, that whole weekend was full with every single hookup and non-hookup site. So interesting to see not just the popular weekends filling up right away, but some of these holiday weekends as well. So that was a great sign of the popularity there. That's still going forth. And then we also hired a deputy recorder. Rebecca Green is her name. You might recognize the name from the Urban Forestry Board. Rebecca came as a very highly qualified candidate, actually served in this capacity before. So she was a great fit. Really a wonderful interview. Think she'll be a good addition to our team.
Where was she before?
So she worked for Napa, the city of Napa, as a deputy recorder.
In Napa, Sonoma, Mendocino.
That's correct. Oh gosh. And I think that's about it. I've got a couple other little things, but I know it's been kind of a long night, so nothing too materially notable.
All right. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Scott, you still online?
Yes, sir. I'm here. You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Just keep it brief. Got the RFP request for proposals for the UGB consultant posted on the website today, and so that process is underway, and hopefully get some good companies, some good consultants applying for that to help us with the UGB amendment. The final plat for Sunset Meadows just got approved, so that means that the multifamily building permits that have been kind of held up until such time as the plat getting recorded means that project can go forward. And Matt recently met with them on site to look at tree preservation to make sure that they're marking off the trees that they're not supposed to cut. So that's an indication, I guess, that they're pretty serious about going forward with that project. So some multifamily units coming on the market here in the not too distant future. Short-term rentals, we'll bring that back to council at a work session on the 24th of this month. We've got good response from the survey that we sent out. I think Matt mentioned like 50%, 40 to 50% of them responded. That might have actually gone up since I last talked to him. And then got a lot of interesting data in terms of police calls to properties that have short-term rental license. So we got a lot of good information to share there. And so that's coming back. I think I mean, there's a lot of other stuff going on, but I think I'll just keep it short and see if you have any questions.
All right, anybody have any questions for Scott?
Do you have any responses yet for the request for proposal for the Main Street building?
That's a question for Carrie.
Carrie, do we have any?
No, we just posted that out on Monday.
Okay.
A comment, excellent work on the ordinance.
Yeah.
On the dark sky. I read it literally twice because I wanted to be sure I really understood what you were saying. And it wasn't that you were obtuse, but there was a lot of content and feed in there. And so it's a really, really great starting point. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah.
Thank you. And like any good thing, it has the work of a lot of people involved with it. So, but excited about it as well.
You don't look excited.
Is that better?
All right, anybody, anything more? Thank you, Scott.
Go away.
Jackson, I'm gonna leave Carrie for last.
You have anything else?
Yeah, you got more, Jackson? You got an update for Public Works?
Yeah, Public Works doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
They're not busy.
I don't know what they did today.
So the city's contracted snow removal service was mobilized last night for the snowfall. The crew has been working since midnight to get the travel lanes cleared. They will be in tomorrow, early morning, to do some road widening and clean up, as well as a couple staff members on throughout the day to hopefully clear off any slush forming so that doesn't reform into ice overnight. They're staying rested and aware for the weather to come. So we're keeping our eyes on the forecast. See what else. The memo you folks received about the environmental sustainability plan and net zero. Unfortunately, we did not reach that for the 2023 year. We hit about 95%. I think it was just one of those things where we filled up the fuel tank just a couple days too early. So
Man.
got us under, but certainly by the end of next year, I can see that hitting or exceeding 100%.
Okay.
That's all I have for you folks.
I don't think anybody's mad.
No.
I had to comment, you probably can't answer this question, but the sidewalk on the other side of the school administration building here has not been plowed yet. I know the school district was out here this evening when I came in, just starting to chip away at this end of it, but technically that side does now belong to ODOT. So I was wondering if that's ODOT's responsibility, or if, there was maybe something in the agreement that the school district still handled it, or I wasn't even sure if it was in the contract for the downtown core. I don't know where that line is drawn, so, but that is a relatively well-used intersection and sidewalk.
With that change, I'll have to look into that and see
Okay.
where that responsibility
It does get a lot
is.
of foot traffic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mostly by her.
Yeah. and
It goes
a lot
twice
of
a
it,
day.
yeah.
I use it twice a day.
Right.
But I am not the only one using it.
No,
I
no.
see other people out there, which is great. It was great. So thank you.
All right, any other questions? Good job tonight. Thank you so much for filling in. All right, Gary.
Joe stole my thunder, that deputy recorder position. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
January 22nd.
Now you created a vacancy on my urban forestry board. I gotta fill.
We did,
Jeez.
yeah. So I'm very excited about that start. The RFP was issued for the Main Street building on Monday. Those are due on, I believe, February 9th. So we'll see
Good.
what happens there. There was a press release that went out, and then we also did send out an email to anybody who had contacted us and that was interested in that building. So you can see where we land with that one. We do have a URI meeting tentatively scheduled for the 24th, time to be determined, hopefully by tomorrow morning. But you guys will see some calendar invites coming your way for the meeting on the 24th. As well as we already know that that meeting will start at 5 p.m., not 5:30. That's a pretty hefty workshop that we've got going on that night. We're working on the open house for January 22nd, 4:30 to 6:30. A survey was sent out on Monday. Couple of questions. We had received 50 responses by Tuesday morning. I haven't had a chance to go look at the responses since then, so I'm sure there are more, but that was some great early feedback. So we will, pull that all together, and that will be ready for you folks during goal setting on February 6th, which is at 9 a.m., not p.m. EDCO lunch, those that asked have been signed up and should have received emails confirming that. Apparently it is sold out at this point, so glad we got the tickets. And then the CLA, the Civic Leadership Academy, I've been working with PSU and C4C in some meetings. We're reviewing the application, and C4C is leading the application process for that, for those 10 to 12 people that'll participate. We looks like that will open January 24th, but we're confirming on Friday kind of what that application looks like. We will, as we get closer to the choosing the people for that cohort, we will lean on one city councilor to help with that process. So that's all that I have, unless you have questions for me.
Have you had any interest in people wanting to?
Yeah, we've been talking about, C4C has been talking about, I've been talking to folks, so I think we will have definitely an issue group. We are interested in having some students. We're going to open up some positions for students between 16 and 18, which will probably be a separate, from the pool that we do for the rest of that. I think that's important. We're just trying to come up with a criteria right now, how we balance that for a diverse group of people.
So that it would be in the evening?
It'll be Mondays from 5:30 to 8, starting on April 15th for 6 weeks. And is open really just to the cohort. It is not a public process where people can come and take part or listen to that. It's really a
Right.
So that we will lean on counselors to come and make opening remarks, probably each of you at least one of the meetings.
Run. What are you doing here?
Yeah,
Yeah, run for office, right? Is that what you
Right.
meant? Yeah.
we're looking for
It is not
candidates.
unknown that we are setting this up, that it ends right as it opens up for city council ability to apply for that, so.
Okay. Any questions? A further question? No? Good job. Up to us now.
Yep.
Who wants to go first?
I have a short one. Had Public Works Advisory Committee meeting to discuss updates or upgrades to the McKinney Butte Road that goes between the high school and the new elementary school. And you talk about sticker shock. When you see what some of the, people think about, well, we're just gonna do some striping and put in some sidewalks and that'll just, it shouldn't be any big deal. It's expensive, but some of the things they're talking about doing are significant and they're gonna last for years and years. And so, it's gonna be safety. It's gonna be money well spent. We have new people, some new people on the advisory board. They're a lot of real wonks, energy engineering folks. And one of the things they always ask when they're new is, well, what does the city council want from us? Why, what is our purpose here? What are we, and I'm always telling them, we get a lot of stuff that comes to us and we are not always experts in each category of item that comes through here. So it's so beneficial to have an advisory committee of people who do care about and specialize in and have background in the topic that's being discussed, so that the not so obvious actually items that you might wonder about or see as a red flag, we might not. And so that gives us that second level of assurance that when we move forward on something that it's had some good review. And so, this is a new group and I think it's really going to be worthwhile because they ask some good questions.
Yeah. And what I would tell them pretty much the same thing, but I would say, hey, look, we're up here trying to preserve public safety, and
Mhm.
this particular project especially is right through some schools. I'm not an expert on crosswalks or signage or lighting or, so whatever you guys come up with.
Do you even use them?
Well, yeah. You're really shoveling it tonight.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're the experts on that. We're looking for them to come up with the good ideas and how much does that cost and how long does it take and, when does it go in? And, yeah, great. So,
And they had some good comments that, Paul wasn't there, Jackson was, helping with that meeting as well, and the consultant was going, oh, okay, yeah, okay, you could tell he was considering what they were saying and, looking at that as an issue and what ought to be, so he's gonna take it into consideration. They were paying attention.
so sticker shock, 5 figures?
No, I'm
Just wondering.
yeah, no, I mean, it's just not striping some lines on the
Right.
pavement. There's a lot more to it than that. So,
Did some of this stem from earlier conversations with the public that we've had in that area?
oh,
about-
absolutely.
I mean, isn't that amazing to me?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's amazing. So that,
It won't happen
a-
fast enough.
one
It's
or a
happening.
very small group of people can say, hey, look,
Yeah.
there's schools here. We need to look at this. And it went to the staff and now it's kind of filtered up.
It was always known that there was going to
Sure.
be changes that needed to be made based when the new school went out there. But when we got citizen input, that was, hey, we're real concerned about how this is going to impact our neighborhoods around here.
Right.
That just meant, okay, yeah, we really got to deal with this. We got to make this a
Yeah.
higher priority. So it
Okay.
it was good. Good stuff.
All right. So, all right, anything else for you? Any questions? How about you?
Don't have much. We did, not have a urban forestry board meeting. It was canceled and, haven't had a parks board meeting, since before the holidays. And just one quick comment. I was sorry to see Paul leave. I want to comment on his statement about survey. I don't know how many surveys you get a week, month. I get a lot unsolicited. I don't fill any out if I don't know what the purpose of the survey is, or if it's not coming from some entity or organization. So, I would have liked to have said that to him. He's not here to hear it, but, I want to be very clear that, I get lots of different surveys, especially coming through Nextdoor and places like that. We have no clue why these questions are being answered.
Right.
And how
How it's going to be utilized.
And so, because we're a decision-making body, unless it's coming from the state or from some organization that we belong to as a city, I ignore them. I think that's good policy.
No, it's totally fine.
I'd like to add to that.
Go ahead.
I was actually thought that it wasn't clear whether we were being asked to take the survey or it was already going out to the public. I wasn't really sure what was happening with that. So,
Yeah, I don't remember
Yeah.
it at all.
yeah,
I don't remember it either, but that's my.
So,
I remember it.
I gave him my poor excuse. I'm just busy. I'm sorry, I mean, I get a lot of email and
Yeah.
I have 3 email accounts,
Mm.
so. Anything else?
Nope, I'm all set, sir.
You're doing good? Your wife's doing good?
Yeah, no, she's doing better.
I
Not there
gotcha.
yet. Yeah,
We'll talk later.
thank you for asking.
How
All
about you?
right, so I have been relatively busy. I went to the COCO meeting that the mayor graciously invited us to. And Jordan and I went to that, so that's Central Oregon
Cities organization.
Cities Organization. I know there's some county people in there.
It was our annual luncheon where we invite legislators
So many
from the area.
Yeah, so there was a lot of interesting topics, regional topics about obviously the water changes, water regulation changes, talk about some of the juniper reduction projects that have been going on. Yeah, there was some good mix of speakers. I kind of wish, I was frustrated that a lot of people obviously kind of petered out by the end. I don't know if that was too long, but it was kind of frustrating because like, well, we have a lot of good speakers here, like people should stick around and, I know we're all busy, but
There was a good discussion at the end about substance abuse and
Yeah.
that whole discussion with
right.
Jason Crow.
Well, and
Jason, yeah. But anyway, his discussion I thought was really good. I mean, just,
From
and
the-
it's not something you bring up as a regional issue
Right.
very often.
Right.
But he's championing that, and so I just thought it was good. So.
Yeah, and I think there was a very common temperature in the room of everybody, no matter what organization you were with, that it's like, there is this void of substance abuse programs, of places, that kind of transitional place, or at least, any kind of things in that sector, mental health, where people really need to have, shelter and observation, and don't necessarily need to be incarcerated, but they need to be kept safe from themselves and everybody else, and that massive gaping hole in there. And, that's a very common thing, no matter what jurisdiction you're from. So it was nice to kind of have that conversation. Also attended the SCED, the Sisters Economic Development Group, kind of fleshing out goals, that Eric Strobel has worked on. So I can think we're getting pretty close to, setting those goals, at least for the, the Sisters area. And let's see, I attended the superintendent's coffee for the school district last week, and I made sure to highlight that I know Eric from EDCO, our rep, was saying that he has been engaging with the principal at the high school to kind of restart, or I don't even know if they actually technically ever participated, but EDCO does have a program called Youth Career Connect, where they connect interns, high school interns, with their business partners, where it's not just like, here's an internship and go get me coffee, but a much more robust experience, designed to kind of create the next generation of professionals. And so Sisters High School hasn't been involved in that either for years or never. So the principal is excited to get more engaged with that. So, I kind of brought that up and thanked the superintendent and made sure he knew that was going on. And that kind of explained to people in the room that, who Eric is and what he represents, and we pay for him, but he works, like there's, a lot of people just don't even know who he is and what he does and how, and so that was a good learning opportunity for some people in there. And then, attended a Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, meeting last week as well. And again, goal setting, working on that. Two things or three things. One is, we do have an ODOT bike representative who's part of that, and Safe Routes to Schools grants are opening next month. So for anything over there, and they are also expanding. It used to be kind of a 1 mile radius. They're going to 2 miles now. So anything that can
You
kind
hear
of,
that, Jackson?
yeah.
Safe routes to school grants.
Yeah, next month. So
Yeah, I think they get.
Next
I think I forwarded it. Yeah. So next month. So I think that there's an opportunity of the sticker shock. And we're going to try to host the BPAC May meeting here in Sisters. So I'm going to try to get the library, and if I can, I might be sniffing around this building for hosting that meeting. But that'll be nice to have people up here right in the middle of our roundabout construction. They can come participate. And then one other thing is, in our goal setting, there was just kind of this, because there's been some new members to BPAC and a little bit of turnover, just kind of re-understanding what the mission of BPAC is. It's an advisory committee. It doesn't really have a lot of power, but what is the purpose of that committee, and what, where can we be influential? One of those things is being the conduit between entities like ourselves. I'm the only elected on that committee right now, which is, I feel, a little weird. There's a City of Bend's Public Works person who's on the committee. Yeah, that's about it for that kind of representation. There's an ODOT member, so, but I find it, just, reemphasizing, I am that conduit to that group and vice versa. So, if there's anything of value that you feel like I could be doing or should be doing or learning or taking back to them, please don't hesitate to talk with me about that, because that was definitely one of the advantages of why that group is existing. And then, yeah, then EDCO board meeting tomorrow morning, so to be determined what that will look like, so. That's it.
Yeah, if you even get there.
No,
Depends.
they decided
Oh, it's
we'll
all Zoom.
Zoom, but I think, I don't think it was weather related. I think there was some other issue they didn't mention, but they said
No.
it is now Zoom.
And
So,
BPAC stands for?
Bicycle and Pedestrian
Yeah,
Advisory
I thought I
Committee
thought, but I just,
for Deschutes County.
Yeah.
It's under the purview of the county.
And they have a representative on the ODOT's, the Central Oregon Act
Oh, cool.
Oh,
Area Transportation Committee. They have a.
that's what I thought, but I guess maybe it was something different, like business advocacy.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah,
it is.
yeah, it's a web.
All right. Any questions for Councilor Lutz? Okay.
So there was no, the COIC and the CEDS meetings were canceled in January. So nothing to report there. I did attend, a League of Women Voter meeting on, Crisis Center. And they started up in May this last year. It's a Deschutes County representative that's there. And, the good news is, if someone's having a mental crisis, they can call 988 and they're immediately connected with someone who has the abilities to assess them and to help them and to decide, if they needed to go to a shelter and how to get there. They're all connected with the sheriff, police departments. They're connected with EMT, the hospital. And so it's like a very well-designed service.
I better write that down.
Yeah.
988.
You
988.
evoked 988 and I heard sirens coming, so you gotta be careful.
I was thinking the same thing.
Careful.
That was great timing on your part. I don't know how you arranged that.
Yeah.
I
good stuff.
didn't, but yeah. So anyway, it's pretty exciting that it's so well coordinated. So I also went to I met with Lou Louis Blanchard, and I want to revisit maybe in our goals what we do, what as a city we offer for the unhoused or unsheltered to do with their way water, because we don't really have a solution. And so, basically that's just going out in the forest.
Wastewater,
Yeah, gray water, I meant to say.
gray
sorry.
water or black
Gray.
water?
Mhm.
Gray
Both,
water or
aren't
black water, both, I think.
Both.
Yeah, both, just their refuse. And so we have a dump station, but it's not open in the winter. And then we will have something in East Portal in phase 2, but until then, we don't have anything. And that's something I think we need to think about. And then also, I think we need to think about what solution we can do, because people can only stay in the forest for 14 days. And so then they have to move, and they're, over 50% now of our unhoused work and have children that go to, and not all of them have children, but some have children that go to the school. So moving after 14 days that's really difficult. So again, the pressure to figure out some kind of sheltering is pretty high still. And then the only other goal I have is something that came up tonight, which is, upgrading our signage code.
I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
Jackson, isn't the dump station in phase 1?
Originally phase 2, but has since been moved. Elements of both phases have been merged.
That's what I thought.
Oh, good.
I've been harping on this for 3 years.
Oh, well, thank you.
It's not a new topic for me, but I hear what you're saying and I agree with you. And so was very happy to hear that it was in phase 1.
Oh, yeah, I am too. Okay, thank you.
Well, we have to have a way to get it across town too, right? So, okay. Do you have anything else?
Just, it'll suck it out of there real fast when you're done.
Yeah, right. I really only have one thing, and that is, I had a COCO meeting, on Monday this week, and the first thing we did was elect officers, and I am no longer the chair of COCO.
Good thing.
It's okay. It wasn't expected though. Generally, if you're the chair and you're in the second year of your term as mayor, you get elected again, but apparently, somebody else wanted to be chair more than I wanted to be, and so, Mayor Fitch.
You didn't go out and advocate for yourself.
I did, I really didn't. I
You've
just
got to
thought,
get lollipops out with your name on it.
yeah, but that's okay. My influence isn't any less. I'm still representing the City of Sisters at Cocoa. I'm still the co-chair of the water subcommittee, so my water stuff is still very important, and I just don't have to run the meeting anymore, which is kind of nice. And also that means maybe I'll just be on Zoom because I don't have to run the meeting, so I don't have to run to Redmond
Every time.
once a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, but who knows? I probably should do it for the water subcommittee anyway. So, but other than that, I'm still the co-chair, or the vice chair, so I'm second in charge. I don't have anything more than that, other than it's, again, we got a lot of good stuff done tonight. And, I know people want better engagement, and I do my best, and I know we're all doing our best. And I think that most of these topics that we have had discussions on have been around for longer than just tonight. So let's just try and remind people, we have discussions.
Yep.
We have discussions. You and I have we have discussion. So,
No, they just stand at the podium and bleed out their hearts. And then we go, thank you for your testimony. Go, where did that go?
I need
Yeah,
a quart of
they don't
blood.
see what happens.
I
next.
get
I
it.
feel for them.
Yeah.
I get it.
I get it.
But
Although Paul's question did get answered by Gary, when he had, the opportunity. So,
right.
in some cases we can answer their questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
You want to check?